Students, there are only 3 months left until the college entrance exam. My homeroom teacher, Li Ming, stood at the front of the class. His voice was heavy. He told us we needed to decide our paths, the liberal arts track or the martial arts track. If we chose martial arts, the registration fee was 30,000 yuan. We had 7 days to hand it over. The classroom erupted into whispers, but I just stared out the window. 30,000. The number felt like a weight on my chest. I practiced hard, and my talent for movement was decent. My blood chi levels were among the best in class. But 30,000 yuan? I was just a student. Even with part-time jobs, there was no way I could find that much money in a week. After class, I followed Li Ming to his office. My voice felt small when I asked if I could pay a few days late. He looked at me and sighed. I knew he liked me. He knew I worked harder than anyone. In our class, I was ranked in the top 10. But this was just a regular class. Usually, only the top 3 had a real shot at a martial arts university. For a kid ranked 10th, that 30,000 might just be money thrown away. My family situation was a mess. My parents died in a beast tide when I was 3. Since then, I'd lived with my uncle, Su Guoming. He had 2 kids of his own who were also training. Supporting one martial artist is hard enough for a normal family. Supporting 3 was nearly impossible. Su Hong, it's not that I don't want to help, Li Ming said gently. Rules are rules. I can't grant an extension. He suggested looking into private martial arts halls instead of the exam, but we both knew that was a lie. Without the resources of a university, you had no future. I nodded, thanked him, and walked out. I looked up at the sky, feeling a strange sense of displacement. I had been in this world for 18 years. It looked like my old world, but everything changed 300 years ago. A star seed fell, martial arts awakened, and beasts evolved into monsters. The world's barrier shattered, and alien races invaded. Humanity fought back, pushing the front lines into the stars, but the war was still raging. When I first crossed over, I dreamed of becoming a supreme powerhouse. Now, I was being defeated by a 30,000 yuan entrance fee. Su Hong, what are you standing there for? Let's spar. It was Chen Lin, my best friend and seatmate. I shook off the gloom. There was no point in worrying about the money if I didn't keep my skills sharp. Coming, I called out. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the moon took its place. The school gym stayed bright under the lights. Sweaty teenagers filled the hall, faces set with grim determination. In a corner, a dull thud echoed. Chen Lin staggered back, clutching his palm and grimacing. Damn, Su Hong, your Vajra punch got better again. Did you reach the micro level? I nodded. A couple of days ago. Martial arts mastery went from basic to proficient, then micro, great success, and finally perfection. Incredible, Chen Lin said, giving me a thumbs up. We started learning the Vajra punch at the same time. He had just hit proficient, and I was already beyond him. He told me I was probably the best in the class now, but I didn't care about the praise. I just wanted to keep going. By 8 p.m., Chen Lin was exhausted. He wanted to eat, but I'd been dragging him through drills for hours. Eventually, I let him go. Before he left, he leaned in close. Hey, have you heard of the underground fights? I paused. Underground fights were a gray area, brutal matches where people bet money and winners took home big purses. You're not thinking of joining, are you? I asked. Those places were filled with desperate veterans and killers. People died there all the time. I'm not crazy, Chen Lin laughed. I just meant we could go watch. See what real fighting looks like. Maybe later, I replied. He waved goodbye, leaving me alone in the gym. I kept practicing until midnight, my body soaked in sweat. After a quick shower, I started the lonely walk home through the empty streets. When I reached our old apartment, I stopped at the door. I could hear my uncle and aunt talking inside. The rent is due in a month, my uncle, Su Guoming, whispered. We're still 8,000 short. There was a long silence, then a heavy sigh. I'll find a way. Don't tell the kids. Especially Su Hong. He's at a critical point with the exams. I leaned my back against the wall, listening. I know, my aunt said, her voice trembling. But the neighbors said the martial arts exam fee is tens of thousands. The sound of a lighter flicked. My uncle must have been standing by the window, smoking. He didn't answer. Maybe I should stop my medication, my aunt suggested softly. It's not curing me anyway. We could save the money for him. And Xiao Hai and Xiao Meng are in junior high now, my aunt continued, her voice barely a whisper. They're growing fast. They're practicing martial arts, so we can't skimp on their food. I'll stop my medicine and find a job. Just doing needlework at home isn't enough. Your health is already poor, my uncle, Su Guoming, cut in. His voice was heavy. Don't think about that. You focus on your treatment. We won't cut back on the kids' food. I'll buy what's needed. And Su Hong's registration fee too. He's the most talented in the family. He has to keep training. But, no buts, Su Guoming said softly. As long as I'm here, I'll find a way. Just don't tell the kids. Don't wake up the younger ones. Su Hong should be home any minute. Let me help you with that medicinal plaster. All right. I stood outside the door, head down, silent. My fists were clenched so tight my knuckles turned white. I took a deep breath, forced a smile onto my face, and pushed the door open. I'm back, I called out. In the cramped living room, my uncle was lying on the sofa. My aunt held a pungent-smelling medicinal plaster in her hand. The moment they saw me, the worry on their faces vanished. They both beamed. You're back. How was practice today? My uncle asked, smiling. Great progress, I said with a grin. I walked over and naturally took the plaster from my aunt's hand. Auntie, let me do it. Hey, you brat. She playfully poked my head. Trying to steal my job of taking care of my husband? We all laughed. After I applied the plaster, my uncle stood up and patted my shoulder. It's late. Get some rest so you're not tired tomorrow. You got it, I replied. I gave him a cheeky look. Need me to carry you to your room, old man? My uncle's eyes widened. Think you're all grown up now, huh? Mocking your old man. He raised a hand as if to swat me, but I laughed and ducked into my room. That kid, I heard him chuckle. But as he took a step, his face twisted in pain. He grabbed his waist, his expression agonized. My aunt hurried over to support him, and they slowly limped to their room. Inside my room, the smile dropped from my face. I shut the door silently. Our apartment was tiny, just 2 bedrooms and a living room. My uncle and aunt had one room. I shared the other with my younger brother, Xiao Hai, and my sister, Xiao Meng. We had 2 bunk beds. The siblings shared one, and I had the bottom bunk of the other. The top bunk above me was piled with junk. I looked at my sleeping siblings and tiptoed toward my bed. I didn't want to wake them. But as soon as I pulled up the covers, Xiao Hai's voice drifted over. Brother? You still awake? Yeah, I whispered. I'm awake too, Xiao Meng said, her head popping out from under her blanket. You too, I sighed. I was about to tell them to sleep when Xiao Hai spoke again. Brother, I want to drop out of school. I sat bolt upright, my brow furrowed. Why? Is someone bullying you? As if. Xiao Hai scoffed. I'm the one who does the punching. I'd bruise their faces before they could touch me. Then why? Xiao Hai leaned over the edge of his bed, his expression serious. I want to quit and help the family. I'm stronger than Dad now. I can help him move crates. My uncle worked as a manual laborer, unloading cargo. Me too, Xiao Meng added softly. I'll go with Xiao Hai. Then Dad can rest. I'm actually stronger than Xiao Hai anyway. He can't even beat me in a fight. What did you say? Xiao Hai snapped. What? You want to go right now, Xiao Hai? Xiao Meng glared at him, and Xiao Hai immediately lost his bravado. I watched them bicker and stayed silent. I realized then, they had heard our aunt and uncle talking too. Brother, what do you think? Xiao Hai asked. I think you're full of crap, I said firmly. Stay in school. But brother. Xiao Hai, I cut him off. Listen, Xiao Hai said quietly. Xiao Meng and I aren't as talented at martial arts as you. If we quit, we can take the pressure off the family. You can focus on training, get into a martial arts university, and become a professional warrior. Then we can just relax and let you support us. Xiao Meng giggled. Yeah, once you're a pro, I'm retiring. I'll just stay home and live off you. I forced a small smile. My heart ached. They were too sensible for their age. It felt like a wall was pressing against my chest. Enough, I said, rubbing my face. I gave them a confident grin. Just focus on school. You don't need to worry about the house. I already have a way to handle the rent and the exam fees. They both froze, eyes wide with surprise. Really? They were still kids, after all. I nodded. Of course. You think I've been training for nothing? I struck a dramatic pose, spreading my arms. Do you even know what talent looks like? They looked at each other, relief washing over them. If they could stay in school, of course they wanted to. Xiaohai saw my exaggerated pose and started laughing. Brother, you're acting again. I flicked his forehead, making him yelp. Xiaoming was about to tease me too, but she saw what happened to her brother and quickly pulled her blanket up to her eyes. You got something to say too? I looked at her. Nope. I didn't say a word. She ducked completely under the covers. Go to sleep, I laughed. I walked out of the room and onto the narrow balcony. I leaned against the railing, staring at the night sky. After a long time, I let out a self-deprecating laugh. Talent? Maybe. But it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. I thought about what Chenlin had told me earlier. Underground fights. I pulled out my phone. The screen was a spiderweb of cracks, and searched for information. My eyes locked onto the prize money. If I used my entry-level Vajra fist, it wasn't impossible. My gaze hardened. When you're poor, you have to change, or you're crushed. I couldn't solve the fees or the family's debt any other way. I had been hesitating before, but seeing my junior high siblings willing to give up their futures for me, I'm an 18-year-old man. I couldn't be a coward anymore. The moment I made my decision, a crisp chime rang in my head. Ding. Host's indomitable martial heart detected. System binding successful. Ding. Beginner's gift pack opened automatically. Ding. Congratulations. You have obtained the talent. Eternal unparalleled. Ding. You have obtained 1 second insight. I froze. A system? I had lived in this world for 18 years. I had given up on any transmigration perks a long time ago. I never expected it to wake up now. I stared at the floating words in my mind, my eyes locking onto those final keywords. An indomitable gaze. An unyielding heart for the path of martial arts. So that was it. I let out a complicated, self-deprecating laugh. Maybe I always had this system, but I just lacked the trigger to wake it up. They say being unyielding is easy, but doing it is another story entirely. If I hadn't heard my uncle and aunt talking tonight, or seen my younger siblings willing to give up their dreams just to lighten the burden on my shoulders, I might never have found this do or die mindset. I would have stayed hesitant. I took a deep breath, forcing my racing heart to steady as I began to study the interface. As time passed, my eyes grew brighter. This system was incredibly powerful. Simply put, as long as I defeated or killed an enemy, including ferocious beasts, I would earn martial points. I could use those points to increase my vitality, my mental strength, and my martial skills. Open panel, I whispered in my mind. A clean, simple screen appeared before my eyes. Name, Suhong. Talent, eternal unparalleled. Vitality, 85+. Mental strength, 23+. Constitution, mortal body 3%+. Martial skills, Vajra fist, micro level 7%+. Floating light palm, proficient 35%+. Skytread step, entry level 56%+. Martial points, 0. There was a plus sign next to every attribute. That meant as long as I had points, I could level up anything. My vitality was at 85. That was 3 points higher than a month ago. I was close to becoming a quasi-martial artist. At 90, you hit that rank. At 100, you officially became a rank 1 martial artist. But then I saw the mental strength stat. My eyes widened in disbelief. In this world, besides martial artists, there was another path, mentalists. They could control the world with invisible force. They were incredibly rare, maybe 1 in a million. And my system could actually upgrade that? I forced myself to stay calm and kept reading. The skills weren't surprising, but then I saw Constitution. I remembered reading that everyone's body was different. Some were born with special physiques that allowed them to cultivate at lightning speed. There was a plus sign next to mortal body too. Did this mean I could eventually evolve my very biology into something godlike? My heart hammered against my ribs. It took a long time to settle down. What does eternal unparalleled actually do? I wondered. I clicked on the description. Talent, eternal unparalleled. Throughout history, there is no one who can surpass the possessor of this talent. You are number 1 across all ages. I stared at the text, completely stunned. Number 1 in history? I didn't feel any different. But then, I tried to recall the difficulties I'd faced while practicing the Vajra fist. Suddenly, I froze. Those problems that used to haunt me, the techniques I couldn't quite grasp, they felt incredibly simple now. It was as if the answers were laid bare. My throat felt dry. I turned my thoughts toward the floating light palm and the skytread step. A thought instinctively bubbled up. Asterisk, why is this so easy? How was I ever this stupid? Asterisk. It felt like being an adult asked to solve 1 plus 1. I didn't even have to think. The answers just appeared. I needed to test this. There was an open space in my apartment complex. I didn't take the stairs. I vaulted over the balcony railing and instinctively activated the skytread step. Before, at entry level, I could barely kick the air to slow a fall. I lived on the 5th floor. I figured one mid-air step would be enough to let me land safely. But the moment I jumped, something changed. My feet hit the air, but it didn't feel like thin air anymore. It felt like solid ground. Boom. A loud sonic pop echoed through the quiet night. I didn't fall. I shot upward like a rocket. In a single bound, I cleared 3 stories and landed firmly on the roof of the building. I looked back at the balcony I'd just left, then down at my feet. I was dazed. Holy crap, for real. The building was 8 stories tall. A single entry-level step had sent me flying up 3 floors. It felt surreal. Just then, a notification chimed in my head. Skytread step, entry proficient micro level. Wait, I only took 1 step, and I'm at micro level. I gasped. I finally understood what eternal unparalleled meant. Even if the skytread step was just a rank 1 skill, jumping 2 mastery levels in 1 breath was insane. If it took 1 breath for this, how long would the floating light palm take? What about the Earth-grade Vajra fist? 2 breaths? Before I could celebrate, a string of curses erupted from the windows below. Which brat is setting off firecrackers at midnight? Are you crazy? Let people sleep. If I catch you, I'll blow your damn head off. I rubbed the back of my head, embarrassed. The sonic boom from my step had woken the whole neighborhood. I needed to move. I ran to the other side of the roof and jumped down, choosing to hop from ledge to ledge this time to stay quiet. I landed like a feather on the ground and hurried toward the complex gates. The security guard was dozing off. I looked back at the dilapidated buildings. When I'd walked home earlier, I was drowning in worry. Now, I felt like I was walking on sunshine. Give me a little more time, and I'll solve everything. My uncle won't have to break his back. My aunt will get her treatment. My siblings will stay in school. And that exam registration fee? It's nothing. I felt a surge of pride. I was already brave enough to face the underground fights with just my fists. Now that I had the system, I would be unstoppable. A few minutes later, I arrived at a local outdoor training ground. It was 2 a.m. The place was deserted and cold, but I didn't feel tired at all. I was too wired. Oh, when did they add 2 rank 1 combat testers here? I walked over to the machines. They were designed to measure a martial artist's striking power. You hit them with everything you've got, and they spit out a number. These were rated up to rank 1. In this world, we go from martial apprentice to quasi-martial artist, then through ranks 1 to 9. Above that are the grandmasters and kings. From rank 1 onward, every stage is split into low, mid, and high tiers, determined entirely by the strength of your vitality. I stood before the machine, pulled back my fist, and took a deep breath. It was time to see what I was truly capable of. In this world, a martial artist's true combat power isn't just about raw stats. It depends on the grade of your martial arts and how well you've mastered them. The grades go from F all the way up to SSS. I needed to know where I stood. I, Su Hong, stepped up to the rank 1 tester and took a deep breath. I centered myself, channeling everything into my Vajra fist. I let it fly. A heavy thud echoed through the empty park. The numbers on the screen blurred as they climbed, finally settling at 1,027. I broke the 1,000 mark. My heart skipped a beat. Usually, a martial artist's combat power is about 10 times their vitality. With my vitality at 85, hitting over 1,000 meant I was already performing at the level of a rank 1 martial artist. It was all thanks to my Vajra fist being at the subtle mastery level. Wait, earlier, my sky step reached subtle mastery with just 1 kick. How much did that last punch help my Vajra fist? I pulled up my interface. Vajra fist, subtle, 58%. Holy crap, I muttered. It was at 7% just a minute ago. One punch boosted my mastery by 51%. If I kept going, I'd hit perfect mastery in minutes. I didn't waste a second. I started practicing the forms, my fists cutting through the air with a rhythmic whistle. By the third punch, a surge of power exploded from my core. My fist seemed to tear through the air itself, leaving a visible wake of pressure behind it. A notification chimed in my head. Vajra fist reached great success. I didn't stop. I dove deeper into the rhythm, my movements becoming fierce and overbearing. Then, I threw one last punch. It looked plain, simple, even, but the air in front of me literally exploded with a loud crack. Vajra fist reached perfect mastery. I checked my phone. Only 15 minutes had passed. Mastering an Earth-grade technique in 15 minutes? If anyone found out, their jaws would hit the floor. Let's try this again, I whispered, walking back to the tester. I threw the exact same punch. Boom. The machine, which weighed several tons, didn't just record the hit. It flew off its base and slammed into a nearby wall. I froze. Oh man. I rushed over to scramble the heavy machine back into place. I didn't have the money to pay for property damage. Hey, who's there? What are you doing in the middle of the night? A voice made me jump. I turned to see a young man walking toward me, rubbing his eyes and looking incredibly annoyed. He was the guard sent by the city to watch over these new machines. Apparently, he was tired of being woken up by local martial artists every morning at 6 a.m., and now I was ruining his midnight sleep too. He looked me up and down. I could see him calculating. He probably thought I was just some kid. He was a rank 1 martial artist, and in his mind, no real martial artist would be hanging out at a public outdoor park at 2 a.m. Hey kid, he barked. Was that machine always against the wall? Are you trying to steal it? I'm not stealing anything, I said, pulling the machine upright. I was just testing my strength. Testing? You moved a multi-ton machine to the wall for a test. He laughed, sounding excited now. He probably thought catching a thief would get him a promotion. He started rotating his shoulders, warming up to take me down. Look, kid, just surrender. I'm the one who set the record on that machine. You don't want to fight me. I was getting annoyed. He was just making things up now. I told you, I didn't move it. I hit it, and it flew there. You hit it? Please, he scoffed, stepping closer. He was ready to grab me, but then his eyes drifted to the screen on the tester. It was still glowing with my last result. His pupils shrank to pinpricks. He looked at the screen, then at my face, then back at the screen. You want to go? I asked, my voice turning cold as he got into my personal space. The guy suddenly broke into a cold sweat. He shivered, his entire attitude flipping in a heartbeat. Oh, no. No, brother. I was just kidding. He stammered, backing away fast. You keep practicing. I was never here. Bye. He turned and bolted. I stood there, scratching my head. What a weirdo. I looked back at the screen. 1,850. Perfect mastery was even stronger than I thought. That was nearly the power of a mid-tier rank 1 martial artist. I ignored the guard and moved on to my other skills. Back in his small guard shack, the young man sat trembling in his chair, his heart thumping against his ribs. 1,850 combat power. That kid could have killed him with one punch. He's just a high schooler, the guard whispered, wiping sweat from his forehead. What kind of genius trains at a public park at 5 a.m.? That's just insane. By 5 a.m., the park was filled with the sound of sonic booms. I was a blur, kicking off the air itself, soaring like a cannonball from one side of the field to the other. When I finally landed, I was breathing hard but feeling more alive than ever. System, I thought. Show me everything. The system panel flickered to life in my mind. Name, Suhong. Talent, Eternal Peerless. Blood Chi, 85. Spirit, 23. Constitution, 3%. Vajra Fist, perfect. Fuguang Palm, perfect. Skystep, perfect. Martial points, 0. In a single night, I had pushed 1 Earth-grade technique and 2 rank 1 techniques to the perfect realm. My heart hammered against my ribs with excitement. I walked over to a rank 1 combat tester and started raining blows down on it. Punches, palms, over and over for a full minute. The numbers danced between 1,800 and 1,900. I did the math. A rank 1 early-stage martial artist usually had 100 to 200 blood chi. Mid-stage was 200, and high-stage was 300. My raw combat power was already closing in on a mid-stage professional, and that was without even factoring in the massive multipliers from my techniques. For a mediocre student with only 85 blood chi, this was impossible. The underground boxing circuit was divided by rank. Apprentices fought apprentices, and martial artists fought martial artists. With my current strength, I could crush any apprentice or even a trainee martial artist with one hand tied behind my back. The matches happen every night, I thought. I'll go check it out tonight. I headed home first. During breakfast, my aunt looked at me with a worried expression. "Xiao Hong, I know you're working hard, but don't pull all-nighters," she whispered, pushing a plate toward me. "You need to rest." My uncle nodded, his voice stern but kind. "Don't be so restless. Consistency is better than rushing. You have to balance work and rest." They acted like everything was normal, hiding the crushing debt and worry from the night before. I took a big bite of a bun and smiled. "Don't worry, Uncle Andy. I feel great." My younger sister, Su Xiaoming, giggled. "Mom, Dad, stop worrying. My brother is as strong as a bull now. He could run in the rain all day without losing his breath." My younger brother, Su Xiaohai, looked like he wanted to crack a joke too, but he remembered the tough love I gave him last night. He kept his mouth shut. It was a smart move. As soon as Xiaoming finished talking, Auntie reached out and pinched her ear. "Is that how you talk to your brother?" Xiaoming winced and yelped for help, making me burst out laughing. Xiaohai let out a quiet sigh of relief. We finished breakfast in high spirits. "Mom, Dad, we're heading to school," Xiaoming shouted. "I'll take them," I said, grabbing my bag. "Be careful on the road," Andy called out. "Xiaohai, Xiaoming, don't bully your classmates. But if someone bullies you, hit them back hard. We don't start trouble, but we don't fear it either." "Got it, Mom," Xiaoming chirped, sounding way too innocent. Xiaohai rolled his eyes. She didn't bully others, sure, but she beat him up whenever she felt like it. He glanced at her, thinking about snitching, but Xiaoming gave him a sharp, knowing look. He immediately stood up straight, tucked his hands behind his back, and acted cool. "Mom, I'm the one who does the bullying. Who could possibly mess with me?" He conveniently left out the part about his sister. As soon as we walked out of the apartment complex, the smiles vanished from their faces. Anxiety clouded their eyes. They were good at faking it for our parents, but they couldn't hide it from me. I reached out and ruffled both of their heads. "Hey, stop it. I won't grow if you keep doing that," Xiaoming protested. Xiaohai looked up at me, his eyes full of desperate hope. "Brother, was what you said yesterday true? Do you really have a way to fix things? You're not just lying to make us feel better?" Xiaoming stopped complaining and looked at me too. "Tell us the truth, brother. If we can't afford it, we'll just drop out and help the family." I stopped walking and grabbed their shoulders, forcing them to look me in the eye. "I'm not lying," I said, my voice heavy with conviction. "I really have a way. Trust me." Seeing how serious I was, their eyes finally lit up. They knew that when I used that tone, I meant it. Xiaoming hopped with joy, and a bright smile finally broke across Xiaohai's face. Watching them become kids again was all the motivation I needed. I didn't care about being a hero. I just wanted my family to smile. After dropping them off, I headed to Xingqing High School. As soon as I entered Class 6, my friend Chen Lin dragged me to my seat. "So, have you thought about it? Are we going to the underground matches tonight?" "I'm not going," I said, shaking my head. Chen Lin's eyes widened. "Are you serious? You're going to miss a rank 1 slaughter fest? You won't regret it." "I'm not going to watch," I thought to myself. "I'm going to fight." I didn't tell him. If I did, he'd freak out and tell my aunt and uncle. I didn't need more people worrying about me. Suddenly, our homeroom teacher, Li Ming, walked in. "Everyone, head to the gymnasium immediately." The class was stunned. "Teacher, what about morning study?" Li Ming laughed. "You can stay here and study if you want." But the principal invited a rank 3 martial artist to teach everyone a C-grade technique today. Are you sure you want to miss that? A rank 3 master? A C-grade technique? The classroom exploded. Everyone bolted for the gym faster than they ran to the cafeteria at lunchtime. My eyes lit up. I wasn't afraid of difficult techniques. I was afraid of not having enough of them to learn. A C-grade technique. Chun-Lin whispered as we ran, punching the air. If I learn this, I might actually have the guts to step into the underground ring myself. I looked at him, genuinely shocked. He blinked, then punched my arm. What? You don't believe me? Then he deflated. Fine, I wouldn't go. Those guys are brutal. Most of them have techniques at the great success realm. I'd just be a snack for them. He leaned in, patting my shoulder like an old man. But you, Xiaohong, I have high hopes for you. When your Vajra fist hits the perfect realm, you go fight. I'll bet everything on you, and we'll split the winnings 50-50. We'll be rich. He started laughing at his own joke. Am I a genius or what? I gave him a thumbs up. Totally. Meanwhile, at the school gate, Principal Li Chengshan was waiting. A black sedan pulled up, and a fit, middle-aged man stepped out. This was Chun Tian, a rank 3 martial artist and an old war buddy of the principal. Took you long enough, the principal teased. I took a taxi here, you old goat, Chun Tian barked back with a grin. You should have sent a limo. They laughed and bumped fists. Chun Tian was even stronger than the principal, who was only at the early stage of rank 3. Come on, the principal said, leading the way. The students are already waiting. Principal Li pulled Chun Tian toward the gym, but Chun Tian looked completely fed up. He stopped in his tracks and stared at the principal. Are you serious? You're treating me like a donkey. I came all this way, and you won't even give me a cup of tea. Tea? Of course I have tea, the principal said. He reached into his bag and pulled out 2 plastic bottles. I've got iced red tea and iced green tea. Which one do you want? Chun Tian stared at the bottles, then gave a sarcastic thumbs up. You're something else, Li Chengshan. You really call bottled iced tea tea? Unbelievable. Just tell me if you're drinking it or not, the principal countered. Give it here. Chun Tian grabbed the red tea. He noticed it was a massive 1-liter bottle. See? I'm looking out for you, the principal joked. Chun Tian just flipped him off and got down to business. Let's talk seriously, Chun Tian said. How's this batch of students? The principal sighed. Most are still just martial trainees. I've only got about a dozen quasi-martial artists. As for rank 1 martial artists, only 2. And they just broke through recently. Chun Tian shrugged. That's not terrible. Any hidden gems with real talent for techniques? If there were, would I be sighing like this? Chun Tian went silent for a moment, then groaned. So there's not a single top-tier talent, and you still called me here to teach a C-grade technique? Most of them won't even understand the basics. You think my thunderclap punch is a common cabbage you can find at the market? With this student quality, the 2 rank 1s might learn it, and the quasi-martial artists might barely scratch the surface. As for the trainees, teaching them a C-grade technique is like a pipe dream. The principal looked a bit annoyed. I'm not asking you to teach the trainees. I'm focused on the rank 1s and the quasi-martial artists. But as principal, I have to give everyone an equal shot. Who knows? Maybe a trainee will surprise us. Chun Tian shook his head. Now you're just talking in your sleep. We watched as the 2 of them walked into the gym. Every eye in the room locked onto them. Students, the principal announced. Let's welcome rank 3 Master Chun Tian. He's here to teach you a new technique. Thunderous applause broke out. I joined in, clapping along with my class. We were standing in the middle section of the gym with our teacher, Li Ming. The elite class was right at the front, closest to the stage. The gym was packed, and the air felt heavy and cramped, except for the space around the elite class. They had enough room to actually move and practice. It was their special privilege to watch up close and mimic the movements in real time. The rest of us in the regular classes were squeezed together like sardines. We could only watch and try to memorize everything to practice later. I saw the envy and jealousy in the eyes of the students around me. The elite class students noticed it too, standing tall with their chests out. At the very front were Li Tu and Chin Shan, the only 2 rank 1 martial artists in school. They looked calm, acting like they were in a league of their own. All right, students, Chun Tian said, cutting through the noise. No more talk. Today, I'm teaching you a C-grade technique, the thunderclap punch. I'll demonstrate it 10 times. How much you learn depends entirely on you. He dropped into a stance. The gym went silent. Everyone stared, terrified of missing a single detail. The elite class started mimicking his movements immediately. Watch closely. Our teacher, Li Ming, whispered to us. This is a rare opportunity. Even he was staring wide-eyed. As a rank 1 himself, this was a big deal for him too. Chen Tian began the form. The thunderclap punch is fierce and overbearing, he explained while moving. At the entry realm, your punch should sound like a crack of thunder. He threw a punch. Boom! A sound like a literal lightning strike echoed through the gym. At the proficient realm, you get 3 cracks. At the mastery realm, 5. At the great success realm, 7, which is where I am now. He accelerated. Boom, 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 boom. 7 consecutive blasts erupted as he finished the form and stood still. And if you ever reach the perfect realm, you'll hear 9 cracks. I haven't even reached that level myself, so don't get ahead of yourselves. If you can just reach the entry realm today, I'll be impressed. He glanced at the elite class. Li Tu and Qin Shan were doing their best to follow, but they were just copying the shape of the move without the soul. Chen Tian wasn't surprised. 10 seconds to memorize, then I'll go again. In my section, Chun Lin leaned over and whispered, "Man, this is impossible. Is this really what a C-grade technique is like? The difficulty is insane. And it's so crowded I can't even stretch my legs. By the time I find space to practice, I'll have forgotten everything. Right, Su-hong?" I didn't answer. When Qin Lin turned around to complain, his jaw dropped. "I wasn't there. Where did he go?" Qin Lin muttered, looking around frantically. He nudged our teacher. "Mr. Li, Su-hong is gone." Li Ming blinked, confused. "He was just here." He scanned the room and caught a glimpse of my back as I slipped out the gym's back door. He sighed and shook his head. He thought I'd given up. He remembered me asking to delay my school fees and figured I had just lost my spirit. "Just focus on your own learning," he told Qin Lin. Outside, the air was fresh. I rubbed my chin, talking to myself. A C-grade technique, it didn't seem that hard. I found an empty patch of ground and closed my eyes, recalling every detail of Chun Tian's movements. I stepped forward and threw a punch. Boom! A sharp crack of thunder echoed in the quiet air. In my mind, a notification chimed. Thunderclap punch reached entry realm. I didn't stop. I was completely locked in. Moments later, I threw another sequence. Asterisk bang, 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 asterisk. 3 cracks of thunder followed my fist. Thunderclap punch reached proficient realm. Back inside, the atmosphere was tense. Li Tu and Chun Shan were competing with each other, their eyes filled with rivalry. To them, no one else in the school mattered. Chun Tian finished his 7th demonstration and walked over to the principal. "How is it?" the principal asked. "Not bad," Chun Tian replied. "Li Tu and Qin Shan have the best talent. They should be able to reach the entry realm today." The principal felt a weight lift off his chest. C-grade techniques were notoriously difficult, not just because of their power, but because they were complex to learn. He had prepared for the worst-case scenario where nobody learned anything. "What about the others in the elite class?" the principal asked. Chen Tian shook his head. "Unlikely." The principal nodded. If the quasi-martial artists couldn't do it, the trainees in the regular classes didn't stand a chance. Well, at least it might motivate them. But you're right, there aren't many good seeds in this batch. As they spoke, Chen Tian walked back toward the students to start his 8th round. He had no idea that just outside the walls, I was already surpassing him. "The last 3 times," Chen Tian announced. He didn't waste a second and began his final demonstrations of the thunderclap punch. His movements were a blur of controlled violence. Inside the gym, Li Tu watched with predatory focus. As soon as the principal's guest finished, Li Tu threw a punch of his own. Boom! A single crack of thunder erupted. The students gasped. Li Tu had reached the entry realm. He opened his eyes, a smug grin spreading across his face as he looked over at his rival, Qin Shan. But before he could utter a word of triumph, another boom echoed through the hall. Qin Shan had done it too. "I got it first," Li Tu said, his voice cold. "I win." "Don't get ahead of yourself," Qin Shan countered, his eyes burning with intensity. The gap was only a few seconds. "We'll settle this during the monthly exams." The two of them stood there, radiating confidence, acting as if they were the only 2 people in the entire school. The rest of the elite class felt a crushing sense of inadequacy. Even though they were supposedly the best, standing next to these 2 made them feel like regular students. Meanwhile, outside the gym, I was in a completely different league. Asterisk bang, 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 asterisk. 5 consecutive thunderclaps shattered the silence of the empty lot. I checked the notification in my mind. Thunderclap punch reached subtlety realm. I pulled out my phone and checked the time. It had taken me nearly 20 minutes to push the technique from proficient to subtlety. I wiped the sweat from my brow, feeling the sheer power coursing through my nerves. As expected of a C-grade technique, I muttered to myself. It's on a totally different level than the D and E-grade garbage. I didn't stop to celebrate. I dove back into the rhythm, my fists cutting through the air like lightning bolts. Back inside the gymnasium, the atmosphere was much bleaker. Chen Tian had finished all 10 demonstrations. Principal Li Qingshan's hopeful expression had soured into disappointment. Aside from Li Tu and Chen Shan, no one else had managed to learn a single thing. Even the teachers from the regular classes looked embarrassed. They were supposed to be the mentors, yet they were being outperformed by 2 teenagers. Man, what are Chen Shan and Li Tu made of? My friend Chen Lin grumbled. He had already given up. He kept glancing toward the back door, looking bored out of his mind. I should have just left with Su Hong. This is a total waste of time. Our class teacher, Li Ming, wanted to say something encouraging, but the words died in his throat. The gap in talent was just too brutal. He looked around at the sweating, frustrated students and sighed. They were all just background characters in someone else's story. Maybe Su Hong was right to leave, Li Ming whispered to himself. At least he didn't stay here to get his spirit crushed. Chen Tian walked over to the principal, wiping sweat from his forehead. Not bad. Those 2 kids learned it. My trip wasn't a total waste. Want to say a few words to the kids before we grab dinner? The principal asked with a forced smile. Nah. Chen Tian waved him off. I'll take the dinner, but skip the speech. I need some air. As Chen Tian headed for the back exit, he heard the principal's voice booming behind him, trying to give the students a motivational, chicken blood speech about hard work. Chen Tian just shook his head and stepped outside. The path of martial arts is cruel. Chen Tian sighed, looking up at the sky. The gap in talent only gets wider. Without a miracle, hard work alone can't bridge it. Suddenly, something caught his eye. In the distance, a lone student in a school uniform was practicing. Chen Tian squinted. It was the thunderclap punch. He felt a flicker of surprise. Most regular students would have given up, but this kid was out here grinding immediately after class. How diligent, Chen Tian thought. But useless. Even geniuses like Li Tu needed 7 demonstrations while watching him up close to reach the entry realm. For a student to try and learn it from memory alone, it was impossible. He turned to leave, but then a sound stopped him dead in his tracks. Asterisk boom, 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 asterisk. A series of thunderclaps erupted from the empty lot. 7 distinct cracks of thunder. Chen Tian's eyes nearly popped out of his skull. He spun around, staring at the boy's back. Before he could even process what he was seeing, another sequence followed. Asterisk boom, 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 asterisk, boom, 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 asterisk. 7 rings. The great success realm. A student. Chen Tian's voice trembled. His lips were literally shaking. I just finished teaching it. And he's already at great success? Is this a joke? He stood frozen, unable to blink. He watched my movements, his confusion slowly turning into a strange kind of trance. He wasn't just watching me anymore. He was learning from me. I didn't know he was there. I was completely immersed. Finally, I threw a punch that felt perfect. Boom! 9 cracks of thunder roared through the air. I get it, Chen Tian shouted, slapping his thigh in a moment of pure realization. That's how it works. The inspiration was fleeting, so he immediately began practicing right there on the spot. 7 thunderclaps rang out, followed by a sudden, explosive 8th. He had broken through. He had been stuck at the great success realm for years, and watching me had pushed him to the brink of perfection. Old Chen, you improved. Principal Li walked out just in time to see the 8th burst. Wait a second, you old dog. Were you holding out on me during the demonstration? Chen Tian snapped out of his daze and looked toward the empty lot. I was gone. I had slipped away while he was practicing. What are you talking about? Chen Tian snapped. You could hit 8 rings this whole time, and you only showed the kids 7? I bought you that expensive iced tea for nothing. You have the nerve to bring up that cheap tea? Shin Tian roared. I just broke through. Because of that kid. He looked back at the empty space where I had been. His face went pale. He's gone. Who's gone? The principal asked, confused. Come on, let's go eat. You idiot. Shin Tian lunged forward and punched the principal right in the eye. Ow. What the hell, Shin Tian? It was just a joke about the tea. You told me this school had no good seeds. Shin Tian hissed, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and awe. You said Li Tu and Qin Shan were the best you had. They are. The principal yelled, clutching his blackened eye. Then tell me, Shin Tian whispered. What do you call a student who can hit 9 rings of the thunderclap punch? The principal froze. His breath hitched. 9 rings. Perfection realm? You can't be serious. I saw it with my own eyes, Shin Tian said. The principal's legs went weak. He nearly collapsed right there on the pavement. He looked up at the sky, his mind reeling. A monster like that? In my school? Why didn't I know? Suddenly, he bolted upright, his eyes wide with a frantic realization. He had to find me. You mean that student? The one who was just standing in the empty lot. Principal Li Chengshan didn't wait for another word from Qin Tian. He exploded with power, leaving a trail of afterimages behind as he sprinted toward the open ground. He scanned the area frantically. His eyes locked onto a teenager in a school uniform walking toward the cafeteria. His face lit up. Hey, you. Wait a second. The student turned around, looking completely bewildered. You mean me, principal? What's your name? Li Chengshan panted, grabbing the boy's shoulder. I'm Qin Lin, the boy stammered, his mind going blank. Great. Quick, show me. Perform the thunderclap punch. Right now. Qin Lin scratched his head, looking lost. Here? Now. Yes, now? Move, the principal urged. Qin Lin didn't want to argue. He took a stance and tried to recall the movements from the demonstration. He went through the forms, but his execution was clunky and awkward, a total mess. When he finished, he looked at the principal with a sudden spark of hope. So, how was it, principal? Qin Lin asked, his heart racing. He started thinking, wait, why did he pick me out of everyone? Am I a hidden martial arts genius? Did he see a spark of greatness in me that I didn't even know I had? Li Chengshan stared at him. A heavy, painful silence filled the air. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it. Finally, he gave a half-hearted wave. It was fine. Keep practicing. He turned on his heel and walked away. As he walked, he suddenly let out a loud, maniacal laugh. All teachers, assemble in my office immediately. Move it. Qin Lin stood there, his heart thumping against his ribs. He saw my punch and immediately called a staff meeting. It's true. I really am a buried talent. Nearby, Qin Tian walked past and saw the look on the boy's face. His lip twitched. He wanted to say something, but he decided to keep his mouth shut. There was no point in shattering a kid's dreams like that. 5 minutes later, the office was packed. Every teacher, including my homeroom teacher Li Ming, was there. I want names, Li Chengshan barked. Every single student who left the gymnasium early today. I want them on my desk now. The teachers exchanged nervous glances. Li Ming cleared his throat. Principal, are you going to punish them? He was worried. He knew why I had left early, and if this was about punishment, he didn't want to hand me over. Punishment, Li Chengshan laughed. I'm thrilled. We have a monster in this school. Someone just hit 9 rings with the thunderclap punch. The room went dead silent. 9 rings. Perfection realm? Even the top students, Li Tu and Qin Shan, had barely grasped the basics after 10 viewings. Li Ming felt a wave of relief. If it wasn't about punishment, he could talk. Let's start with you, Li Ming. The principal said, pointing a finger. Anyone from your class leave early? Just one, Li Ming replied. A boy named Su Hong. Li Chengshan's eyes widened. Su Hong? Tell me about him. Has he been acting strange? Is he the quiet, reserved type? The kind who hides his strength? Li Ming thought for a moment. He's definitely steady. As for strange, well, he's been depressed lately. He's struggling to pay the martial arts exam fee. He even asked me for an extension a few days ago. The principal's excitement flickered. He frowned. A genius who could hit 9 rings in minutes wouldn't be struggling for $30,000. With that kind of skill, He could make that much in a single night at the underground fights. Forget it. Next, the principal shouted, pointing to another teacher. Then he turned back to Li Ming. Actually, if that student is having a hard time, give him the extension. I'll authorize it. Thank you, Principal, Li Ming said, relieved for me. Meanwhile, I was in the cafeteria, staring at my system panel while I ate. Name, Su Hong, Blood Chi. 85, Mental Power. 23, Techniques. Thunderclap Punch, perfect. Vajra Punch, perfect. Floating Light Palm, perfect. Sky Step, perfect. Martial Points, 0. The Thunderclap Punch was already at the perfection realm. Now, I needed martial points. The system told me I could earn them by defeating enemies. If I went to the underground fights tonight, every opponent I beat would count. I finished my meal quickly, fueling up for the night ahead. Back in class, Chun Lin was watching the hallway. He saw another student being called into the principal's office. That's weird, he muttered to me. The principal called that huge meeting hours ago, and they still haven't called me in. I don't get it. He shook it off and looked at me. Anyway, Su Hong, are you sure you're not coming to the fights tonight? A bunch of us are going. Even the guys from the genius class will be there. I'm sure, I said. The bell rang. I grabbed my bag and bolted out of the room before he could say another word. 2 hours later, night had fallen. I stood in front of a massive, dark building. The basement held the underground arena. I had already changed my clothes and pulled on a mask. I slipped past the guards after telling them I was there to fight. When the elevator doors opened to the basement, a wall of heat and noise hit me. Heavy metal music blasted through the air, neon lights flashed, and the smell of sweat and alcohol was everywhere. Women in revealing clothes carried drinks through the crowd of cheering martial artists. I hated the environment, but I had a job to do. I pushed through the crowd to the registration desk. A sign listed the prize money. Apprentice level, 1,000 per win. Provisional martial artist, 5,000 per win. Rank 1 martial artist, 10,000 per win. If I won the apprentice tournament, there was a $30,000 bonus. I did the math. 30,000 for the exam, 8,000 for rent, school fees for my siblings. I needed at least 60,000, and that wasn't even counting my aunt's medical bills. It's not enough, I whispered. The woman at the desk laughed. She was a sharp-looking lady with a smirk. You sound young, kid. Not enough? You think you've already won? Is there a way to make more? I asked. She blinked, surprised by my confidence. Well, if you're that sure of yourself, you could try King of the Hill mode. You stay in the ring and fight everyone, one after another, until the end. And the prize. If you beat everyone, the final prize money doubles. But, she leaned in, the per-win cash is gone. If you lose a single fight in the middle, you walk away with 0. Not a single cent. You still want in. I didn't hesitate. I nodded. She shrugged and handed me a contestant badge. Good luck, kid. You're gonna need it. You can go test your blood chi now, the woman said, pointing toward the left. Wait. I pointed toward the testing machine. What's the deal with that? I had just seen a rank 1 martial artist finish his test. He was holding the exact same badge I had. Every contestant gets the same one, she replied. No difference. I frowned. If that's the case, then couldn't someone? She laughed before I could even finish. I know what you're thinking. High-level martial artists aren't allowed to downgrade and bully the apprentice ring. But if an apprentice wants to fight in the provisional or even the rank 1 ring, as long as you aren't afraid to die, be my guest. I nodded thoughtfully and went to join the line for the blood chi test. The woman watched me walk away, her eyes flickering. She waved a man over. Go place a bet for me. Put it all on this kid losing. Huh? Sister Wong, is he that weak? Don't be stupid, she snapped. That voice is way too young. He clearly has no idea how the rules work. He's just some student here for the first time. It's free money. You want in or not? Damn. If he's just a student, he's dead meat. I'm in. I stepped up to the machine. The display flashed. 85 blood chi. A staff member walked over immediately. Follow me. We'll head to the locker room first. He saw my confused look and explained. Some fighters don't want to show their faces. We provide masks and hoods for privacy. How thoughtful, I thought. Inside the locker room, I scanned the wall. My eyes landed on a rubber bullhead mask. It looked ridiculous, but it worked. I pulled it on, adjusted the horns to make sure I could see, and walked toward the apprentice waiting room. As I stepped inside, a loud bang echoed through the hall. A group of fighters was gathered around a combat power tester, shouting and cheering as they took turns hitting it. I counted 50 fighters, not including myself. Their combat power scores were hovering between 1,000 and 1,200. These were people with less than 90 blood chi, yet their power was incredible. Normally, someone at that level hits for about 800. If I hadn't upgraded my skills, I'd be at the bottom of the food chain here, I realized. But things were different now. I watched them for a moment and felt a wave of calm. I was ready. When the arena doors opened, the crowd of fighters surged toward the ring. I didn't wait. I bolted past them, leaping onto the stage in one fluid motion. I want to play King of the Hill, I shouted, my voice echoing through the speakers. The arena went dead silent for a heartbeat. Then it exploded. Holy crap, someone's actually doing it tonight. Who is this bullhead guy? He looks intense. In the stands, my classmates Chun-Lin and Li Tu looked on, completely bewildered. They had no idea what King of the Hill meant until someone nearby explained the brutal rules. He has to fight everyone, alone. Li Tu gasped. That guy is insane. Chun-Lin pumped his fist, grinning. Then he sighed, leaning over to the others. Man, it's a shame Su-hong isn't here to see this. He's going to be so jealous when he hears about it tomorrow. The fighters on the floor didn't share the crowd's excitement. To them, my challenge was a slap in the face. Choosing this mode meant I thought I was better than all of them combined. I'll shut you up, a middle-aged man roared, leaping onto the stage. Hey kid, it's your first time, right? Let me teach you. Bam. Before he could finish his sentence, I planted a kick squarely in his chest. He flew backward, tumbling clean out of the ring. Next, I said. The big man sat on the floor, blinking in total shock. He hadn't even seen me move. He checked his chest, realizing he wasn't actually hurt. He scrambled to his feet and gave me a small nod of thanks. In this ring, people died. Broken bones were the bare minimum. By kicking him out of the ring without injuring him, I had spared him a lot of pain. I waved him off. I was here for the money, not to start blood feuds. The crowd was stunned. It wasn't every day you saw a fighter get cleared out before they even finished their trash talk. This bullhead has some real skill, someone yelled. Over in the student section, Chun-Lin's jaw dropped. Wait, I thought they said these fights were supposed to be close. He just tossed him like a sack of potatoes. He's just that much stronger, Li Tu explained, though he looked just as shocked. Suddenly, a loud laugh erupted from the provisional martial artist ring next door. A man wearing a white mustache mask jumped onto his stage. The kids are having all the fun. I'm going King of the Hill too. The stadium went wild. It's White Mustache. He's been the champion for 7 days straight. Tonight is going to be legendary. Back in my ring, a notification popped up in my mind. Asterisk defeated apprentice. Gained 3 martial points. Asterisk. I wondered how many points I'd need to increase my blood chi, but I didn't have time to dwell on it. 1 win. The referee screamed into his megaphone. 48 fighters left. Will the bullhead conquer the hill, or will he be crushed? The fans were standing on their chairs, screaming for blood. I ignored them and looked down at the remaining fighters. I beckoned them with one hand. Next, a massive, muscular man jumped up. He grinned at me. Thanks for going easy on my buddy just now. As a reward, I'll try not to break your ribs. He released his aura. His blood chi was suffocating, just a hair's breadth away from being a provisional martial artist. Come on then, I said, stepping into a stance. The big man lunged. He was fast for his size, closing the gap in 3 steps and throwing a heavy punch that whistled through the air. I didn't dodge. I threw a punch of my own, meeting him head-on. The man's eyes widened. He hadn't expected me to trade blows. Seeing my weak frame, he actually tried to pull back slightly so he wouldn't kill me. He realized his mistake too late. My fist accelerated instantly. When we connected, the sound was like a car crash. The man's face went pale as he felt the overwhelming force behind my strike. The veins in his neck bulged as he tried to push back, but it was like trying to stop a tidal wave. I didn't give him a second chance. With one swift kick, I sent the big man flying off the stage. He landed right on top of his friend, hitting the exact same spot on the floor. The man looked up at me, his face a mask of pure confusion. He had 89 blood chi, making him one of the top contenders in the apprentice tier today. He'd actually thought he was being generous by holding back his strength. He didn't realize I was playing a completely different game. He looked at my bull mask with genuine terror, wondering where a monster like me had come from. I didn't stop there. One by one, more fighters stepped up to challenge the hill. One by one, I sent them packing. 10, 12, 15 fighters. It didn't matter. I wasn't even breathing hard. My Vajra fist was at the perfect realm, and in this apprentice ring, I simply had no equal. A roar erupted from the neighboring ring. 5 wins in a row for the provisional stage. I glanced over and saw the man in the white beard mask. He stood there, calm and composed, while the crowd screamed his name. People were whispering that he'd been the champion for 7 days straight. They said he had mastered a mid-tier technique to the perfect realm. I realized then that we were in the same league. If he could handle the higher tier that easily, he was the only real competition in the building. Suddenly, a sharp whistle of air cut through the noise behind me. I didn't think. I just moved. I ducked to the side, and a heavy fist slammed into the space where my head had been a split second ago. I looked up to see a young man grinning at me. He didn't look embarrassed about the sneak attack at all. Fast reaction, he muttered. My blood went cold. That punch was aimed directly at the back of my skull. If I hadn't moved, I'd be dead. The crowd started booing immediately, shouting the name Lin Ping. Apparently, this guy was notorious for dirty tactics. He loved to ambush people and then intentionally cripple them once they were down. He just stood there, waving to the crowd as if the insults were cheers. He didn't see me coming. I blurred across the floor, my fist expanding in his vision before he could even reset his stance. Lin Ping's smile vanished. He tried to throw a desperate counter, but when our fists met, the sound was sickening. His knuckles didn't just break, they pulverized. The force traveled up his arm, snapping the bone and sending a jagged, white shard piercing through his skin. He dropped to his knees, his face twisting in agony. He tried to open his mouth to surrender, his lips trembling with fear. I didn't give him the chance. I reached out, grabbed his chin, and dislocated his jaw with a sharp twist. His plea for mercy turned into a muffled, wet gurgle. He tried to scramble away on his butt, his eyes wide with the realization that he had picked the wrong target. I stepped forward and drove my foot into his chest. I felt his ribs cave in under my boot. His body went limp instantly, sliding across the floor like a broken doll. I pulled my leg back and stood in the center of the ring, my face expressionless behind the mask. If someone treated me with respect, I returned it. But this man had tried to kill me. I felt no remorse for ending him. The arena went silent for a heartbeat. Then, the crowd exploded. They were screaming, standing on their seats, energized by the raw brutality of it. Across the arena, I saw my school friends. Chen Lin and the others were pale, their faces ghostly white. Some of them were actually gagging. This was the reality of the martial world they talked so much about. It wasn't a game. It was life and death. I felt a wave of nausea hit my stomach, followed by a strange, cold shiver of adrenaline. This was my first kill. My hands shook slightly, but I forced them into stillness. I took a deep breath, pushing the sickness down into the pit of my stomach, and looked toward the waiting area. Next, I said. My voice sounded cold, even to my own ears. The referee announced my third win, but no one moved. In the waiting room, the other apprentice fighters were staring at the screen in horror. They had watched Lin Ping get carried away like a dead dog. They weren't just outmatched, they were terrified. One by one, they turned around. They didn't want the money anymore. They just wanted to leave with their lives. Within minutes, the waiting room was empty. The referee looked around, stunned. He had a stadium full of people who had paid for a show, and the King of the Hill challenge had ended prematurely because everyone was too scared to fight me. Is that it? The referee muttered, looking at me. I didn't answer. I just looked toward the neighboring ring, where Whitebeard was already dropping his next opponent. The referee by the other ring started screaming with excitement. Whitebeard had just secured his 8th consecutive win. My referee let out a long sigh of relief. With Whitebeard and one other fighter still dominating the quasi-martial artist ring, the crowd was still engaged. He didn't have to worry about the show ending early. The apprentice ring is closed, the referee announced at the top of his lungs. Our winner is the Minotaur. Let's hear it for him. Thunderous applause erupted. I didn't stay to soak it in. I leaped off the stage and headed toward the back, feeling the weight of 100 eyes on me. As soon as I stepped into the waiting room, a sultry voice drifted over. Impressive. I have to admit, I misjudged you. I turned. It was the woman from the registration desk. She held out a thick stack of cash. Here is your prize money, she said, a playful smile dancing on her lips. 60,000 blue star coins. I looked at the money, then back at her. Are you the one personally responsible for handing out the winnings? She blinked, startled by the question. She shook the stack of cash slightly. Isn't it obvious? Keep it for now, I said calmly. I'll collect everything together in a bit. She froze. Her expression shifted from playful to confused. What do you mean by? I didn't wait for her to finish. I turned on my heel and walked out of the apprentice waiting area. She stared after me for a second before a shocking realization hit her. She scrambled to follow me. She caught up just in time to see me push open a heavy door. Her eyes drifted upward to the sign above the frame, Quasi-Martial Artist Waiting Room. My God, she whispered, her face pale. Is he serious? She remembered what she had told me at the desk. She had joked that if an apprentice wasn't afraid to die, they could try the higher tier ring. It was a sarcastic comment. She never imagined someone would actually do it. Most apprentices have a blood chi around 80. A quasi-martial artist starts at 90. To an outsider, a 10-point difference seems small. But in the martial world, 90 is a threshold. At that level, the physical body undergoes a massive surge in strength and durability. It's not just a number, it's a total transformation of combat power. An 89-point apprentice trying to fight a 90-point quasi-martial artist wasn't a challenge. In her eyes, it was suicide. He's insane, she muttered, shaking her head. Inside the new waiting room, the atmosphere was different. The fighters here were older, stronger, and more composed. They looked at me with confusion when I walked in. They recognized me as the winner from the lower ring, but they assumed I was just there to watch. They turned back to the monitors. On the screen, Whitebeard was a monster. He sent another opponent flying out of the ring with a single blow. The stadium was deafening. Whitebeard, 13 wins in a row, the announcer roared. The fighters around me sighed in admiration. Whitebeard was a legend here, a 7-time champion. He made 13 wins look easy. Most of the men in this room were already deciding not to challenge him. They knew they'd lose. What a bunch of losers. A cold, arrogant voice cut through the room. I looked over. A young man stood in the corner, arms crossed, a sneer plastered on his face. This was Li Ming. I thought Xingqing's underground fighters were supposed to be tough, Li Ming said, his voice dripping with disdain. I didn't realize a joke like that old man could sweep the floor with you all. The room grew tense. Anger flared in the eyes of the other fighters. You've got a big mouth for someone from out of town, one fighter snapped. If you think Whitebeard is weak, why don't you go up there and prove it? The referee's voice echoed through the speakers. Is there another challenger for the quasi-martial artist ring? Li Ming let out a sharp, mocking laugh. He started walking toward the door. Watch closely, he tossed over his shoulder. I'll show you the difference between a real martial artist and a frog in a well. Out on the stage, Whitebeard stood in the center, hands behind his back, waiting for his victory to be finalized. He looked surprised when Li Ming leaped onto the platform. The crowd, sensing a fresh kill, went wild. Please, Whitebeard said, cupping his hands in a traditional martial salute. Li Ming didn't return the gesture. He lunged. His fist moved like a blur. Whitebeard's eyes widened. He barely managed to raise his arms to block. There was a sickening thud. The impact sent Whitebeard staggering back several steps before he could steady himself. Oh, Li Ming sounded genuinely surprised. You actually blocked one? Maybe I underestimated you slightly. He didn't give Whitebeard a chance to breathe. He closed the distance instantly. Try blocking this. Boom. 3 distinct, thunderous cracks echoed through the stadium. It sounded like literal lightning striking the ring. Whitebeard's body was launched backward. He sprayed a mist of blood into the air before hitting the floor like a discarded rag. The stadium went dead silent. Thunderclap fist. Chun-Lin shouted from the stands. My classmates were reeling. We had just learned the theory of this technique this morning, and now we were seeing it used with lethal precision. 3 cracks meant he had reached the mastery level of the technique. Li Tu and Chun Shan looked at each other, their faces grim. Even as the top geniuses of our school, They had only reached the entry level. This guy was a monster. The crowd finally broke the silence with hesitant applause. The power was undeniable. To master a C-grade technique as a mere quasi-martial artist was the mark of a true talent. But Li Ming wasn't finished. He looked around at the thousands of spectators, his lip curling in a sneer. "Is this it? This is the best Xingqing has to offer," he shouted. "Compared to my home in Yanqing, you people are pathetic." The mood shifted instantly. He wasn't just a fighter anymore. He was an invader. He was here to humiliate our entire city. The referees looked furious, but they couldn't intervene. The crowd started screaming insults, telling him to get out of our city. Li Ming just laughed. "Talk is cheap. If anyone here has the guts, come up and stop me." He even looked over at the rank 1 martial artist ring, where an older man was watching with a dark expression. "What? Does a rank 1 want to try his luck too? I don't mind." The crowd was livid. If a rank 1 fighter stepped down to fight a quasi-martial artist, it would be a disgrace to the city even if we won. And if the rank 1 lost? Xingqing would never live it down. Back in the waiting room, the atmosphere was suffocating. Every fighter there knew they couldn't beat him. They were trapped in their own fear. "Step aside," I said. The fighters turned, startled. They saw me, the kid in the Minotaur mask, moving toward the exit. "Hey, kid, don't be a hero," one of them whispered. "We're all pissed, but you're just an apprentice. You'll get killed out there." I didn't answer. I didn't have time to explain. I leaped over the railing and walked straight toward the stage. Li Ming was already turning to leave, thinking no one would dare challenge him. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a shadow. I vaulted onto the ring and stood before him. The Minotaur had returned. The crowd erupted the moment they saw a challenger step up. They wanted blood. "Kill him," they screamed. "Show this outsider what we're made of." But as I stepped into the light, the cheers died down. The confusion started in the front rows and spread like a wildfire through the stands. "Wait, isn't that the Minotaur?" someone shouted. "He's just an apprentice. Why is he getting in there?" The stadium went from a roar to a bewildered murmur. People were rubbing their eyes, trying to make sense of it. I was the guy who had just won the apprentice circuit, sure, but stepping into the quasi-martial artist ring was suicide. "Hey kid, what are you doing?" a man yelled from the front. "Get down before you get hurt." I ignored them. I walked to the center of the ring, my eyes locked on Li Ming. He looked at me with a playful, mocking glint in his eyes. He didn't even see me as a threat. He saw me as a joke. I didn't say a word. I just raised my hand and beckoned him with my finger. The silence broke into a collective gasp. The audacity of it was unthinkable. An apprentice was officially challenging a quasi-martial artist who had just dismantled one of our best. "He's lost his mind," someone whispered. "He actually thinks he can fight. Does he realize Li Ming just crushed White Fox?" In the VIP seats, Chen Shan leaned forward, his face pale. "Is this Minotaur guy insane? That kid from Yangqing is hitting with the force of a triple echo thunderous punch. A single normal strike will shatter an apprentice's bones." Li Tu shook his head, his expression grim. "Even for us, as rank 1 martial artists who just broke through, fighting that kid wouldn't be a guaranteed win. This is a massacre waiting to happen." Meanwhile, Chen Lin was vibrating with excitement, though he looked pained. "Man, this is getting insane. Su Hong, you idiot, you're missing the best night of the year." The referee looked at me, his eyes full of worry. He thought I was being reckless, but he respected that I was the only one with the guts to stand up when the real quasi-martial artists were cowering in the back. He moved closer, tensing his muscles. He was already planning to jump in the second I got hit to make sure I didn't leave the ring in a body bag. Li Ming narrowed his eyes. The mockery in his gaze turned into a cold, sharp anger. He felt insulted that someone so low would dare to beckon him. "You have a death wish," he spat. He didn't even bother with a technique. He just lunged, throwing a heavy, straight punch intended to end the fight instantly. It was fast, but to my eyes, it was clear. I didn't retreat. I stepped forward and met his fist with my own. Bam! The impact sent a shockwave through my arm. Li Ming's eyes widened. He stumbled back a full step, his balance wavering. I was pushed back 3 steps, my boots skidding on the canvas. The stadium went dead silent. The fans stared, their mouths hanging open. Li Ming, the monster who had swatted White Fox away like a fly, had been forced back by an apprentice. What the hell? Chinshan shouted, standing up. He blocked it. Just like that. On the stage, I shook out my hand and looked at him. You're pretty strong, I said. I meant it as a genuine compliment. But to Li Ming, it was the ultimate insult. His face turned purple with rage. He was being patronized by a nobody. He let out a low growl, and his blood chi exploded. Asterisk crack, 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 asterisk. 3 distinct thunderclaps echoed through the air as he prepared his thunderous punch. The referee moved in, ready to save me. But then, a different sound filled the arena. Asterisk boom, 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 asterisk. It didn't stop at 3. It kept going. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 thunderous echoes roared from my fist, vibrating the very floor of the ring. Li Ming's face went from rage to pure, unadulterated terror. He looked like he had seen a ghost, but he was already mid-swing. He couldn't stop, and my fist collided with his chest. The 9-echo thunderous punch hit him like a freight train. He didn't even have time to scream. The silence that followed was heavy. The referee stood frozen, his hand halfway out to rescue me. The crowd looked like statues. Then, the realization hit. 9 echoes. That's the perfect realm, Li Tu whispered, his voice trembling. He's an apprentice, and he's mastered a C-grade technique to the perfect realm? That's impossible. Then, the explosion happened. The fans went absolutely feral. An apprentice beat a quasi-martial artist. The Minotaur is a god. I didn't care about the fame. I turned to the stunned referee. I won. The prize money is mine, right? Yes, he stuttered, nodding frantically. As long as no other quasi-martial artist challenges you, it's yours. I turned my masked head toward the waiting room where the other fighters were gathered. The moment my eyes met theirs, they scrambled backward, shaking their heads in unison. Nobody was stepping into that ring. Not against a guy who could throw 9 echoes. The winner and champion of the quasi-martial artist ring. The Minotaur, the referee shouted. I leaped off the stage and vanished into the back before the crowd could swarm me. As I walked through the tunnel, the other fighters parted like the Red Sea, staring at me with a mix of awe and fear. I reached the front desk where the young woman in the suit was waiting. She was staring at me, her eyes wide and sparkling. I held out my hand. The money. She dizzily handed over a thick stack of bills. I counted it quickly. 60,000 for the apprentice ring, 100,000 for the quasi-martial artist ring, 160,000 Blue Star credits. I turned to leave, but she grabbed my arm. It's late, she whispered, her voice leaning into a flirtatious tone. We have private rooms here if you need to. Rest. I frowned under the mask and pulled my arm away. Women will only slow down the speed of my martial arts, I muttered. I didn't wait for her reaction. I walked out into the cool night air. By 9 p.m., I was just another student walking down the quiet streets of Xingqing, my mask hidden and my normal clothes back on. I felt the weight of the cash in my pocket and finally let out a breath I'd been holding for days. In just a few hours, I had earned more than my aunt and uncle made in an entire year. The martial arts exam fee? Settled. The rent? Settled. My siblings' tuition? Settled. I could finally get my aunt the treatment she needed. I opened my system interface as I walked. Asterisk name, Su Hong. Talent, Eternal Peerless. Blood Chi, 85. Techniques, Thunderous Punch, perfect. Vajra Fist, perfect. Floating Light Palm, perfect. Void Step, perfect. Asterisk. I had defeated 4 people tonight. My strength was growing, and for the first time since I arrived in this world, the crushing weight on my chest was gone. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was winning. I realized that the bulk of my gains tonight came from that last young fighter. It seemed the stronger the opponent, the more martial Dao points I earned. It probably had something to do with their natural talent, too. I tucked that realization away for later. I had points to spend, and I wasn't going to let them sit idle. I looked at my system panel. My blood chi stood at 85. I wondered how far I could push it. I felt a surge of anticipation as I focused on the little plus sign next to the blood chi stat. A prompt popped up, asking how many points I wanted to allocate. I started small, just 1 point. Immediately, I felt a warm ripple through my veins. It was a subtle shift, but it was there. I checked the panel again. Blood chi, 85.1. It took 1.5 martial Dao points to increase my blood chi by 0.1. I grinned. It looked like a tiny amount, but I knew better. In normal training, gaining 0.1 blood chi could take a week, maybe even 2. It was the hardest stat to grow. Now, I could do it in a heartbeat. I had 66.5 points left. If I dumped them all, could I break through to become a quasi-martial artist? The thought made my heart race. I almost hit the button, but I hesitated. Would my body break if I added too much at once? I decided to test the waters. 2 points. No problem. 5 points. Still fine. 10. Then 20. When I dropped 20 points at once, my body felt bloated. A dull, stinging pain radiated through my muscles. I waited, breathing through it until the sensation faded and my body adapted. I kept going. When my blood chi hit 90, something snapped. My power exploded. An invisible wave of energy surged out from me, catching the fallen leaves on the ground and sending them swirling into the air like a cyclone. After a moment, the turbulence settled. I was a quasi-martial artist. I clenched my fists, feeling a level of raw, surging power I'd never known. I closed my eyes, intoxicated by the feeling. My physical toughness had jumped to a completely different level. I didn't stop there. I poured the rest of my points into the stat until my blood chi reached 91.7. I had increased my base strength by 6.7 points in a single night. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. The caller ID read, Song Fei, Thunder Martial Arts Hall. Back when I was desperate for cash, I used to work as a sparring partner at the Thunder Hall. It paid 100 credits an hour. It sounded like good money, but it was a brutal job. Sparring partner was just a polite way of saying human punching bag. Even with protective gear, I'd come home covered in bruises. I didn't need the money anymore, but I had made a commitment. I wasn't the type to break my word. I answered the phone. Suhong, it's almost 10. Where are you? Song Fei asked. On my way, I replied. Good. Hurry up. I hired a teacher to help me with some techniques tonight. You can tag along and learn a bit if you want. He sounded proud. He told me it wasn't just any technique, it was a C-grade spear art. My interest piqued. A weapon changed everything. For a normal person, a blade made them dangerous. For a martial artist, a high-grade alloy weapon made them lethal. I had been focusing on hand-to-hand combat because I was broke, but I knew I couldn't stay unarmed forever. If I went up against someone with an alloy weapon now, I'd be at a massive disadvantage. I'm coming, I said, hanging up. I took a shortcut through an open-air training ground. I remembered seeing a grade 1 combat power tester there the day before. I wanted to see exactly what 91.7 blood chi looked like in terms of raw numbers. Nearby, in a small guard shack, a young man was yawning. He was the caretaker. Finally, he muttered, stretching out on his bed. Everyone left early. I can actually get some sleep. He thought back to a few nights ago when some genius had woken him up in the middle of the night to test their strength. Won't happen again, he told himself, closing his eyes. That was a one-time thing. He was drifting off when, boom, 9 consecutive thunderclaps erupted, so loud they felt like they were inside the room. The guard jumped so hard, he hit his head on the ceiling. He hit the floor, clutching his skull and cursing. Not again, he hissed. He threw open the door, ready to scream at whoever was out there. Then he paused. His anger cooled as a thought struck him. What if it's that same genius from before? He slowed his pace, feeling a bit of apprehension. Geniuses usually trained at elite schools or private gyms, not public parks at midnight. Still, he had to check. When he reached the testing machine, the area was empty. The screen was still glowing, but the person was gone. Are you kidding me? The guard grumbled. Punch and run. What is wrong with people? He walked up to the machine to shut it down. He was mid-insult when his eyes landed on the display. He froze. His jaw dropped so low he could have swallowed a light bulb. Combat Power, 2023. The guard spun around, looking frantically in every direction. When he realized no one was there, he let out a shaky breath and wiped cold sweat from his forehead. Then, he raised his hand and slapped himself hard across the face. Yesterday, I almost offended a genius, he whispered, his voice trembling. Today I almost yelled at a monster. It's this mouth. This damn mouth is going to get me killed. The sound of the slap echoed through the empty night. I walked toward the Thunder Martial Arts Hall, a satisfied smile on my face. My combat power had officially broken the 2000 mark. I found Song Fei waiting by the entrance. He waved me over. Let's go, Su-hong. My instructor is already inside. We walked into a massive, brightly lit training room. It was over 200 square meters, with mirrors lining every wall. It was time to see what a C-grade spear technique looked like. Inside the training room, about a dozen martial artists were already waiting. As soon as they saw Song Fei, they started joking around and greeting him. "You're late, Song Fei," one of them shouted. "Don't tell me he already finished the lesson?" Song Fei's eyes widened in panic. "What? Is it over?" "Not yet," the man replied, shaking his head. "But where have you been the last few days? Today is the final day for the C-grade spear technique." Song Fei froze. I could see the instant regret on his face. He punched his palm, looking miserable. Damn it. If I knew, I wouldn't have gone out to play. If I'd started from day one, I might have reached the basic level by now. The room went quiet. The other martial artists shared a bitter look. "What's wrong?" Song Fei asked, sensing the mood. "Don't even mention it," one of them sighed. The instructor is a rank 3 martial artist named Jiang Ming. Apparently, he owed the hall master a favor from years ago, so he's only here because he has to be. He doesn't actually care about teaching us. He just performs the forms a few times and leaves. He won't even give us pointers. The group let out a collective, frustrated laugh. We've been here for 6 days, and not a single one of us has even reached the basic level. Then, their eyes turned to me. "Anyway, who's this?" "This is my brother, Su-hong," Song Fei said with a grin. "I brought him along to learn. It shouldn't be a problem, right?" "Of course not," they replied, waving it off. "There's plenty of space. Any friend of Song Fei is welcome. Just join in and practice with us. I like the atmosphere here." These guys were friendly. "Thanks, I appreciate it," I said. "Don't worry about it," another guy added. "We haven't mastered it yet, but we've been watching for days. If you have questions later, just ask us. Even if the teacher is lazy, it's still a C-grade technique. Learning even a little bit is worth it." Before he could finish, the heavy doors slammed open. A young man stumbled in, leaning against the wall for support. His clothes were torn and stained with blood. He looked like he'd been dragged through a gravel pit, but his expression was pure arrogance. "My teacher isn't a good instructor?" he sneered, looking at us with disdain. "If you're too stupid to understand the moves, don't make excuses for your own lack of talent." The room turned cold. Every martial artist there frowned, their tempers flaring. I just looked at the guy, surprised. Who was this clown? "Who is that?" Song Fei whispered to the guy next to him. "He's acting like he owns the place." "That's Li Ming," the man whispered back. "He's the instructor's disciple. He's always like this, acting like he's superior to everyone in Xingqing." Li Ming's eyes snapped toward us. "What are you whispering about?" "None of your business," one of the older martial artists snapped back. Li Ming gave a mocking laugh. "That's all you've got? Pathetic." The group was visibly angry now. One man stepped forward and laughed coldly. "You talk a big game for someone who looks like a dying dog. If you're so talented, how did you get beaten into such a sorry state?" That hit a nerve. Li Ming's face turned purple with rage. He glared at the man, looking like he wanted to kill him on the spot, but he knew he was too injured to fight. With a hateful snort, he turned and limped toward the stairs leading to the second floor. Upstairs, in a private room, Jiang Ming stood by the window, looking out over the city with his hands behind his back. "Teacher, I think Li Ming went out again," a burly young man said, bowing respectfully. Jiang Ming frowned. "That boy, I brought you two from Yangqing to challenge the geniuses at the high schools, not to waste time in underground boxing matches. Those fights are beneath us." He was annoyed. Li Ming was a near martial artist. He knew the spear technique and had even reached the proficient level in the C-grade Thunder Fist. In Jiang Ming's mind, Li Ming going to an underground ring was just bullying amateurs. "Lian, go find him and bring him back," Jiang Ming ordered. "I need to teach him a lesson." "Yes, teacher," Lian said. But before he could reach the door, Li Ming pushed his way inside, looking like a total wreck. "Teacher, senior brother," Li Ming muttered. Both men stared at him, eyes wide. "What happened?" Jiang Ming demanded, his brow furrowing. "Did you go and pick a fight with a rank 1 martial artist?" "No. Li Ming looked at the floor, embarrassed. He didn't want to say it, but under his teacher's intense gaze, he had no choice. He told them everything. When he finished, Li Yin looked like he'd seen a ghost. A student? 9 echoes of the Thunder Fist. Jiang Ming's face darkened. A genius like that wouldn't be fighting in underground rings. Are you lying to me? Teacher, I swear it's the truth. Li Ming cried out. Jiang Ming was speechless. He had found a master who had spent years studying the Thunder Fist to teach his disciples. It had taken Li Ming 3 months to reach the proficient level. Li Yin, being a rank 1 martial artist, had reached the subtle level. Even their old teacher had called them geniuses. But now, a random student had mastered the perfect level of the Thunder Fist? It was hard to swallow. Seeing Li Ming's confidence completely shattered, Jiang Ming suppressed his own shock and sighed. Don't compare yourself to monsters like that. Just focus on healing. Once you're better, you and Li Yin will go challenge the students at Xingqing High School. It doesn't matter how talented others are. You need to focus on your own strength. He patted Li Ming's shoulder. Use the students here as stepping stones for your future. That is how you grow. Li Ming looked up, his eyes regaining some of their fire. Yes, teacher. He clenched his fists, vowing to get stronger and find that student one day to erase this humiliation. When do we start the challenges? Li Yin looked at his injured brother. It'll take a few days for him to recover. Let's do it at the end of the month, Jiang Ming decided. The end of the month? Li Yin hesitated. That's when the schools have their monthly exams. Isn't that perfect? Li Ming interrupted, his ambition burning. All the geniuses will be there. We'll show up right when they're feeling their best and crush them. Li Yin nodded, a smirk forming. Which school first? Li Ming smiled confidently. If we're going to do it, we start with the best. We're going to Xingqing High School number 1. Good, Li Yin agreed. Jiang Ming nodded, pleased to see them motivated again. Prepare yourselves over the next few days. No more going out. Yes, teacher. All right, Jiang Ming said, heading for the door. I'm going to finish the final spear lesson. As he walked down the hall, he shook his head. He honestly didn't think there was any point in teaching the people downstairs. They had been at it for 6 days and couldn't even reach the basic level. I don't know why you bother with those losers, teacher. Li Ming's voice drifted from the room. They're just trash. Why else do you think they're at a public hall? Li Yan's voice followed with a chuckle. Most of them are in their 30s or 40s. The best among them is barely rank 1. They have 0 talent. It's a miracle if they learn anything at all. Jiang Ming heard them and smiled to himself. He actually agreed. Learning a D-grade or F-grade technique was one thing, but a C-grade spear technique? With their talent, it was impossible. But that wasn't his problem. He was just here to pay a debt. Once this last class was over, he was done. Downstairs in the training hall, the atmosphere was getting tense. He's almost 30 minutes late, one of the martial artists grumbled. Where is he? I stood there quietly, waiting. I didn't care about the wait. I just wanted to see that spear technique. The guy teaching us was bad enough, but being late on top of it, it was honestly pathetic. He was a rank 3 martial artist, though, so if he wanted to put on airs, there wasn't much a group like us could do about it. We just stood around, chatting idly to pass the time. Suddenly, the heavy doors swung open. Jiang Ming walked in, gripping a standard-issue long spear. He looked at the group of martial artists sitting on the floor and let out a low, sharp bark. What are you all staring at? Get your spears. He was late, yet he walked in barking orders like we were the ones wasting his time. I could feel the collective irritation in the room, but everyone swallowed their pride. They wanted to learn this C-grade technique, so they did as they were told. I grabbed a spear and took my spot at the very back of the formation. All right, Jiang Ming said dismissively. This is my last class. I'm going to teach you the angry sea spear technique. Pay attention. Old rules apply. I'm only showing it 3 times. He didn't care if anyone was actually ready. He just started. The other martial artists widened their eyes, trying to mimic his movements instantly. Song Fei was next to me, his spear wobbling awkwardly as he tried to follow along. I didn't move. I stood perfectly still, my eyes locked onto Jiang Ming. To everyone else, he was moving fast, clearly trying to get this over with as quickly as possible. But in my eyes, his movements felt slow. Every shift in his weight, every flick of his wrist, I captured every single detail. My mind was racing, processing the mechanics of the angry sea style at an incredible speed. By the time Jiang Ming finished the first round, a notification pinged in my head. Angry Sea Spear Technique, Basic Level. It was slightly harder than the Thunder Fist, but that was about it. Jiang Ming didn't give anyone a second to breathe. He launched straight into the second demonstration, and then the third. He burned through all 3 rounds in just 9 minutes. That's it, he said indifferently, barely looking at us. How much you learn is up to you. He turned on his heel and walked out of the training hall without another word. As soon as he was gone, the room erupted. Are you kidding me? How are we supposed to learn anything from that? If he didn't want to teach, he should have stayed home. 3 times. He barely even looked at us. Song Fei looked completely defeated. This was his first day, while the others had at least been watching for a week. He stood there, staring at his spear like it was a foreign object. I just saw the spear spinning like a damn windmill, Song Fei complained, turning to me. I couldn't even tell where it was going. How are we supposed to copy that? It was definitely rushed, I agreed, nodding. A normal person couldn't learn from that. Of course, I wasn't exactly a normal person. I glanced at my mental panel. Angry Sea Spear Technique, Nuance Level. I had memorized everything. With a little bit of physical practice, I knew I could push it to the perfection level. While everyone was grumbling, one of the older martial artists spoke up. Hey, why don't we spar? We can share what we've picked up over the last 7 days. Song Fei, you and your friend should join in. He waved us over with a friendly smile. We haven't mastered it yet, but we have some experience. We can show you the ropes. Song Fei was thrilled and agreed immediately. I was about to decline, but then a thought hit me. If I won these spars, would I gain martial points? By the time I decided, everyone had already paired up. The middle-aged man who invited us waved me over. Come on, kid. I'll be your opponent. I had to admit, the atmosphere among the students here was actually pretty good. They were genuinely helpful. All right, I said, stepping forward and leveling my spear. I'll keep my blood chi low, the man said kindly. Just watch my movements closely so you can see how the strikes flow. He lunged forward with a slow, deliberate thrust. Clatter. His spear hit the floor before he even realized what happened. He stood there, staring at his empty hands in total confusion. He had barely seen me move. It felt like I had flicked my spear with the same blinding speed Jiang Ming used. Sorry about that, I said, feeling a bit awkward. Once my technique hit the nuance level, my body just reacted on instinct. But then, my head rang with a notification. I opened the system. Martial points +5. My heart leaped. I could actually gain points just by sparring. Have you practiced the spear before? The man asked, picking up his weapon and looking at me with pure curiosity. No, I shook my head. Good grief. Are you some kind of genius? He muttered, his eyes widening as the realization sank in. You watched him 3 times, and you can already disarm me? Wait, did you already reach the basic level? The commotion drew the other martial artists over. When the man explained what happened, they were stunned. We've been here 7 days, and we're still struggling. You did that in 9 minutes. No way. That's impossible. Suddenly, someone else stepped forward. Hey, handsome. Spar with me too. I want to see this. Me next. Teach me a few moves. I was suddenly the most popular person in the room. Song Fei just stood there with his jaw dropped. In his memory, I was always just an average guy. Since when did I become a martial arts prodigy? One at a time, I said, trying to hide my excitement. To me, these weren't just students. They were walking piles of martial points. Asterisk, you defeated an opponent. Martial points +3. Asterisk. Asterisk, you defeated an opponent. Martial points +6. Asterisk. Asterisk, you defeated an opponent. Martial points +5. Asterisk. The notifications kept rolling in. I sparred with over a dozen people, my points climbing steadily. When I tried to go back to the first man for a second round, I noticed I didn't get any points. It seemed there was a cooldown for each person. Still, by the time I finished the round, my martial points had hit 35. Most of it came from the rank 1 martial artists. I realized that since I had broken through to the quasi-martial artist level, defeating regular students gave me much less than before. Holy crap, Su Hong, Song Fei said, walking over and shaking his head. Are you a monster or what? I don't know, I laughed. Maybe I just finally had a breakthrough. That's insane. Song Fei said, giving me a thumbs up. Then he looked at me sheepishly. Can you teach me? Sure, I nodded. The other martial artists crowded around again. Teach us too, little brother. Even the older man who helped me earlier was looking at me expectantly. I couldn't say no. They all lined up like disciplined school children. I'll demonstrate it once, I said, gripping the spear tight. I'll go as slow as I can so you can follow the form. I began the angry sea technique. The spear moved like a swimming dragon, the air whistling with every strike. It was powerful, fluid, and intimidating. Wait, this doesn't feel like just the basic level, one of them whispered. I've seen Jiang Ming's top disciple, Li Yin, practice this. Her spear is at the great success level, but Su Hong, he looks almost as good as her. Is he at the nuance level already? They watched in awe as I finished the form. One of them finally got the courage to ask, is that nuance level? Yeah, I replied simply. The room went silent for a heartbeat before erupting again. They were looking at me with total reverence now. I was a genius in their eyes, and they weren't going to waste the chance to learn from me. That wasn't a lie. I went through the movements 3 times, one after another. With every rotation, my understanding of the angry sea spear technique skyrocketed like a rocket heading for orbit. By the time I finished the 3rd set, I took a quick glance at my system panel. The angry sea technique had hit the great success level. I gripped the shaft of the spear a little tighter. My heart was pounding with excitement. Before I could even catch my breath, the other martial artists swarmed me. They weren't aggressive this time. They were humble, asking me about the specific problems they faced while practicing. I answered them all. I focused most of my attention on Song Fei, but I didn't ignore the kind middle-aged man who had helped me out earlier. I didn't just talk, either. I made them run through the drills while I walked through the crowd, physically adjusting their grips, fixing their posture, and correcting the angles of their strikes. For a moment, I wasn't just a student. I was a teacher. The crowd took every word I said to heart. Honestly, they felt I was a better teacher than Jiang Ming. Actually, it wasn't just a feeling, it was a fact. In just 20 minutes, their understanding of the spear had surpassed everything they had learned from Jiang Ming over the last 7 days. Suddenly, the middle-aged man thrust his spear forward. A faint sound, like a distant crashing wave, echoed through the room. He froze, then started shouting with pure joy. I did it. I finally reached the entry level. The other martial artists looked like they'd been injected with adrenaline. They practiced even harder. They were desperate to improve. Soon, under my guidance, a 2nd person broke through, then a 3rd. The 4th was Song Fei. He lunged forward, felt the shift in his power, and stood there like a wooden chicken, stunned. When he finally snapped out of it, he pumped his fist in the air. Holy crap. Su Hong, you're a god. It's a crime that you aren't a teacher. The others nodded fervently. Only they knew the hell they had endured for the past week. Jiang Ming had taught 7 full classes, and not a single person had reached the entry level. Now, in less than half an hour, 4 people had mastered the basics. One of them was Song Fei, who had literally just picked up the spear for the first time today. By the time the 7th person reached the entry level, I slowly lowered my spear and wiped the sweat from my forehead. My time as Song Fei's sparring partner was up. I looked at Song Fei and felt a sense of relief. Originally, this was just a transaction. He paid me, and I worked. He had no obligation to bring me along to learn a C-grade technique, but he did it anyway. I believed in returning a favor with a favor. I had taught him the most out of everyone, and now that he had it down, I didn't plan on sticking around. Is it over already? One of the martial artists asked, sounding disappointed. As I put the spear back and prepared to leave, the group looked at each other. They rushed forward to block my path. Young man, Su Hong, right? The middle-aged man said. Thank you for teaching us so seriously today. Please, take this. It's not much, just a token of our appreciation. He held out some money. I stared at it, caught off guard. This wasn't part of the plan. I tried to decline, but they were insistent. Eventually, I had no choice but to take it. It was 50,000 Blue Star coins. Don't think this is too much, one of them said. With the quality of your teaching, you're worth way more than 50,000. I waved goodbye as I walked out, leaving a trail of whispers behind me. They called me a genius. They lamented that I couldn't stay for a few more days. Someone turned to Song Fei, knowing we were friends, and suggested they all pool their money to hire me. Song Fei just gave a bitter laugh and shook her head. She was the youngest, but she came from a wealthy background and had seen the world. She knew that genius didn't even begin to describe what I had just done. She realized I had only stayed to pay back the favor of the invite. "Forget it, everyone," Song Fei said, looking at the door. To reach the nuance level in a C-grade technique at his age, having him teach us once is already a stroke of massive luck. The others sighed and nodded. They didn't push it. Reaching the entry level so quickly felt like a dream. "He's just so good," one man whispered. "So much better than Jiang Ming." Before he could finish his sentence, the heavy doors swung open. Lian walked in, her voice cold and sharp. "Talking behind people's backs again? My teacher taught you for 7 days, and not one of you reached entry level. Your comprehension is pathetic, and yet you have the nerve to complain about the teaching?" The room went cold. The martial artists weren't going to take that lying down anymore. "If the teaching is bad, it's bad," someone yelled. "You think we're blind? You think we didn't see how perfunctory she was?" "Exactly. Someone else taught us for less than half an hour, and we improved more than we did in a week with your teacher." "It's not even close," another added. "It's like heaven and earth. Your teacher's lessons were useless." Lian's eyes flared with rage. She was about to snap back when Jiang Ming walked over. "What's going on?" Jiang Ming asked. "Teacher," they said. Lian pointed at the crowd and repeated their insults. Jiang Ming's brow furrowed. She knew she hadn't been trying very hard, but she couldn't believe anyone in this small-town gym understood the spear better than her. The gym owner was a rank 3, but he used a blade, not a spear. "Nonsense," Jiang Ming said coldly. "You claim someone taught you better than me? Where are they? Let me see this master." She paused, letting out a mocking laugh. "Or did you just make this person up?" Song Fei stepped forward, frowning. "He's my friend. He finished the lesson and left." Jiang Ming laughed again, a sound full of contempt. She glanced at Song Fei with total disdain. "Your friend? I'll admit I wasn't being very serious, but I refuse to believe a friend of a mere quasi-martial artist could ever compare to me." That was the breaking point. Every person I had just taught felt the insult. Song Fei didn't argue. She simply picked up a standard long spear from the rack. "Watch closely," she said. She began the angry C form. The moment the faint sound of crashing waves echoed from her strikes, Lian's pupils drifted wide. She actually learned it. Jiang Ming stood frozen for a second, but she quickly masked her shock with a sneer. "I haven't seen you here the last few days," Jiang Ming said to Song Fei. "That means this is your first time. Reaching entry level after watching me perform the form 3 times just means you have good natural talent." The crowd groaned at how shameless she was being. "You call that teaching?" someone shouted. "You ran through it 3 times in 9 minutes and called it a day. And if you think she's just talented, what about us? We've been here all week." Jiang Ming sneered at the rest of them. "You lot, your comprehension is just too poor. You can't handle high-level techniques." The martial artists were fuming now. "Then open your eyes and look," one of them yelled. "See for yourself if our comprehension is too poor." They all grabbed spears. They began to move. The sound of the tide filled the room as 6 different martial artists executed the entry-level movements perfectly. Jiang Ming and Li Yan were speechless. Including Song Fei, that was 7 people who had mastered the basics in one afternoon. "We followed you for 7 days and got nowhere," the middle-aged man said, leaning on his spear. "Someone else taught us for 30 minutes, and we all succeeded. What do you have to say now?" Jiang Ming's jaw tightened. She tried to find words, but Song Fei cut her off with a cold smile. "And it seems," Song Fei added, "that you look down on my friend a little too much." "Let me tell you something," Song Fei said, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "He's a student, a quasi-martial artist. He's never even touched a spear before today. But after watching your pathetic, lazy demonstration 3 times, he didn't just learn the form. He reached the micro-level of mastery." Jiang Ming's face paled, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Impossible," she hissed. "That's absolutely impossible." Song Fei didn't bother arguing. She gripped her spear and executed the raging sea technique once more. The room filled with the haunting, rhythmic roar of crashing waves. It was undeniable. Jiang Ming's jaw tightened, her lips twitching as she fell into a stunned silence. The truth was staring her in the face, and she had no way to deny it. Seeing that Jiang Ming was finally speechless, Song Fei and the others let out a collective cold snort and walked out of the training hall. Jiang Ming stood frozen for a long time, her brow furrowed in deep thought. A quasi-martial artist who never touched a spear, and he reached micro-level in a single night? She whispered to herself. What kind of monster is this kid? Li Yin was just as shaken. He stayed quiet for a moment before speaking up. Teacher, they might be exaggerating. When I learned the Raging Sea technique, it took me 2 full days just to reach the entry level, and you called me a genius. Now they're saying some high schooler did it in less than an hour? I don't buy it. Then, Li Yin remembered something. Wait, Song Fei said this genius is a student at Xingqing High. Jiang Ming's frown deepened. She searched her memory, trying to match the description with any of the famous young prodigies in the city, but no one fit. Forget it, Jiang Ming said, patting Li Yin on the shoulder. If he really is a student, you'll run into him eventually. Once Li Ming recovers, we're going to challenge the top talents at Xingqing High anyway. Don't worry too much. Song Fei was definitely exaggerating. Reaching micro-level in 30 minutes? Not even the monsters in the capital or the geniuses from the elite academies could pull that off. He probably reached the micro-level, sure, but he's likely been practicing in secret for a long time. She looked Li Yin in the eye. Just focus on your training. With your Raging Sea technique at the Great Achievement level and your rank 1 middle stage blood chi, there are very few people in this city who can stand against you. The streets were dim, lit only by the flickering yellow glow of old lamps. I walked home alone, the weight of my backpack feeling better than ever. I had just made another 50,000. Combined with what I already had, I was sitting on 200,000, which converted to 10,000 Blue Star credits. I looked at the bulging bag and felt a wave of relief. The rent, the school fees, everything was covered in a single night. In this world, strength really is everything. If you have power, you have a way forward. But as I walked, my thoughts drifted to the front lines. The alien races were always watching, waiting for a chance to tear our world apart. If they ever broke through, we'd be nothing but cattle for the slaughter. It made me realize that I couldn't stop here. I never wanted to feel that sense of helplessness again. I pulled up my system interface to check my progress. Name, Su Hong, Blood Chi, 91.7, Mental Power, 23, Constitution, 3%, Martial Arts. Raging Sea Spear, Great Achievement. Thunder Fist, Perfect. Vajra Fist, Perfect. Floating Light Palm, Perfect. Sky Step, Perfect. Martial Points, 35.5. I noticed my spear technique was still stuck at Great Achievement. Back at the hall, I had focused so much on teaching the others that I hadn't pushed my own limits. Plus, I didn't even own a spear. I needed to get my hands on a proper alloy weapon soon. The spear felt right in my hands. I decided then and there it would be my primary weapon. Time to level up, I muttered. The most important thing right now was my blood chi. Without a guidance technique, training manually was painfully slow. I was still in the quasi-martial artist stage, where you can't absorb the energy of heaven and earth yet. That energy is too violent. If your body isn't strong enough, you'll literally explode. Hundreds of years of human history had proven that you need at least 100 points of blood chi to survive the process. I dumped all 35.5 martial points into my blood chi. Immediately, a warm current flooded my limbs. It felt like a boiling river was rushing through my veins. The sensation lasted for a few minutes before slowly fading away. I checked the panel again. Blood chi, 95.2. I was only 4.8 points away from becoming a rank 1 martial artist. I was so close I could almost taste it. But now my points were gone again. I needed a new source. I remembered the school's monthly exams were coming up in 6 days. The top 10 students got big rewards, so I definitely had to join that. But I needed money for that alloy spear before then. As I passed a small shop, a news report on a TV caught my ear. Beast activity outside Xingqing has been increasing. The city lord is calling for martial artists to help hunt them down. High bounties are being offered. My eyes lit up. Hunting beasts would give me martial points and the cash I needed for the spear. Plus, I remembered how I felt after killing Lin Ping in the ring. It was my first time taking a life, and it had left me feeling unsettled. I needed to get used to the sight of blood if I was going to survive this world. The wilderness it is, I decided. I'd head out tomorrow. Since the college entrance exams were close, the school allowed seniors to choose whether they wanted to attend class or study independently. As long as I showed up for the monthly exam, I wouldn't get in trouble. Back at our rundown apartment complex, the lights flickered in the hallway. My uncle, Su Guoming, dragged his exhausted body toward the door. He was clutching his lower back, his face twisted in pain. He'd thrown his back out yesterday, but he'd spent the whole day hauling crates anyway. He had no choice. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs and sighed, looking defeated. "That damn boss," he muttered. "I've worked for him half my life, and he won't even let me take a 1-month advance on my pay." He felt powerless. He took a deep breath, forced a smile onto his face to hide the pain, and began the slow climb. It took him 15 minutes just to get to the 5th floor. When he opened the door, he saw Xiaohai and Xiaoming in the cramped living room. They were drenched in sweat, their little faces serious as they practiced their horse stances. "Dad, you're home," they chirped in unison. Su Guoming nodded, his heart aching with a mix of pride and guilt. "You're back?" my aunt called out, stepping from the kitchen while wiping her hands on her apron. My aunt noticed Uncle Guoming clutching his back immediately. Her face tightened with worry as she rushed over to help him sit down. He looked exhausted. As soon as he was settled, he lowered his voice, whispering to her about the advance on his salary. It was a plan they had discussed the night before, a desperate hope to fix our situation. My aunt stiffened. She looked disappointed, but she forced a smile anyway. "I'll find another way," she said softly, standing up to go grab some medicated ointment for his back. Just then, the sound of the key turning in the lock echoed through the apartment. I was home. Uncle Guoming quickly reached out and grabbed my aunt's hand, stopping her from getting the medicine. He shook his head firmly. He didn't want us to worry. "Don't let the kids think too much about it," he whispered. She nodded understandingly just as I walked through the door with a wide grin on my face. "Brother," Xiaohai and Xiaoming cheered. Uncle Guoming pushed his pain deep down and forced a laugh. "Xiaohong, why are you so happy today? I haven't seen you like this in a long time. Don't tell me you finally broke through and became a quasi-martial artist?" He was only joking. He knew how hard it was to raise blood chi when resources were tight. I blinked, pretending to be shocked. "Uncle, how did you know?" The room went silent. My aunt and uncle froze. Xiaohai and Xiaoming were so stunned they lost their balance and fell right off their horse stances, landing hard on their butts. They scrambled up, rubbing their backsides. "Brother, you're kidding, right?" Xiaohai asked, his eyes wide. I looked at my family and nodded seriously. "It's true. I've officially reached the level of a quasi-martial artist." "Whoa, brother." The two younger ones lunged at me, hugging me with pure adoration. My aunt and uncle started laughing too, their joy genuine and overwhelming. But behind the laughter, Uncle Guoming's heart grew heavy again. Earlier that day, he had talked to some coworkers. He'd found out that the registration fee for the martial arts exam was $30,000. It had to be paid within a week. He felt a crushing wave of guilt, thinking I hadn't mentioned it because I knew we were broke. He resolved to beg his boss again tomorrow. Whatever it took, he had to get that money for me. "Xiaohai, Xiaoming, uncle, aunt, come over here," I said with a mysterious smile. I led them to the small dining table. "What is it?" Uncle Guoming teased. "Is there another surprise?" "A big one," I laughed. I swung my backpack onto the table and unzipped it. I started pulling out stacks of cash. One after another, the bundles hit the table until the surface was practically buried under a mountain of paper. 20 bundles, 21,000 Blue Star coins in total. The entire room went dead silent. For a family like ours, this much cash was something we had never seen in our entire lives. "Xiaohong, where did this come from?" Uncle Guoming's voice trembled. He looked terrified that I had done something illegal. I gave them a small, white lie. "Don't worry. My principal saw that I broke through to quasi-martial artist and gave me a special scholarship. He has high hopes for me." The tension left their bodies instantly. They exhaled, their faces lighting up with relief and pride. "Uncle, aunt, you've worked so hard all these years," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "From now on, I'll carry the weight of this family." Seeing their faces was better than any victory in the underground ring. "Good. Good. You've grown up, Uncle Guoming muttered, his voice shaking as he tried to blink back tears. My aunt covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face as I told her we finally had the money for her medical treatment. That night, no one slept. My aunt and uncle stayed up talking in low, happy voices. Xiaohai and Xiaoming wouldn't leave my side, asking 1,000 questions until I showed them a few moves that had them cheering and clapping. The next morning, they tried to give the money back to me. They insisted that my training was more important and that I shouldn't waste it on them. I couldn't win the argument, so I took 5,000 and refused the rest. To avoid more arguing, I told them I'd be staying at school to train for a while and bolted out the door. Walking down the street, I sighed. It still wasn't enough. If I had brought home 2 million instead of 200,000, they wouldn't have been so hesitant to spend it. I needed to go to the wilderness. I needed to hunt. I hailed a taxi and headed for the outskirts of the city. 10 kilometers outside Xingqing sat the martial arts base. It was a fortress designed to support hunters who ventured into the wild to kill beasts. When I arrived, the place was packed. Ever since the recent news reports, every martial artist in the city seemed to have the same idea. I waited in line for half an hour before finally getting inside. The base was impressive, with massive transparent glass walls looking out into the wasteland. Near the exit, I saw hunters returning. They were covered in blood, carrying heavy bags that dripped red onto the floor. I watched as they reached the settlement counter. The staff opened the bags and began counting severed left ears, the proof of a kill. I turned my attention to the giant electronic screen listing the bounties. Unranked beasts were worth 300 coins. Tier 1 low-level beasts were 1,000. Mid-level were 3,000, and high-level were 5,000. The rules were simple: no left ear, no pay. With my current strength, Tier 1 low-level beasts would be easy prey. 10 of them would be 10,000 coins. That didn't even include the value of the pelts and meat, though those were bulky and hard to carry. It was time to get to work. I had a family to support. I watched the hunters at the counter. Most of them only brought back the left ears of their kills. It made sense. Ears were light, and space in a pack was valuable. I rubbed my chin, thinking about my own strategy, then turned and headed toward the wilderness entrance. I let out a frustrated sigh. There was another line. The bounties were so high that every martial artist in the city seemed to be here. I started to worry. At this rate, would there even be any beasts left to hunt near the base? Suddenly, a gruff voice cut through the chatter. "Move it! Out of the way!" I looked over. A 5-man team of rank 1 martial artists was pushing through the crowd. They were led by a cocky young man who strutted as if he owned the pavement. They didn't even glance at the line. They just walked straight to the front. There were other teams waiting, some even stronger, with rank 2 members, but to my surprise, nobody said a word. They just stepped aside and let the arrogant kid through. He let out a condescending smirk and disappeared into the wilderness entrance with his crew. Once he was gone, the silence broke. "Damn it," someone muttered under their breath. "Who does he think he is? He's got a powerful uncle, that's who," another whispered. If it wasn't for his uncle's face, I would have slapped him across the street. I listened to the grumbling for a few minutes and pieced it together. The kid was Yi Feng, a mid-level rank 1 martial artist. His uncle, Yi Qi, was a rank 3 master and the head of this entire martial arts base. He spoiled his nephew rotten. I shook my head. People like that existed everywhere. It didn't matter to me as long as he stayed out of my way. Finally, it was my turn at the gate. The staff member looked at my ID, then looked at me. "So young? And you're heading out alone?" He seemed surprised, but he didn't stop me. He just waved me through. I walked through a long metal tunnel. When I stepped out the other side, the air changed. It was fresh, sweet, and carried the scent of wild earth. I took a deep breath, picked a random direction, and started walking. I entered the dense forest. Massive, ancient trees towered over me. I kept my guard up, scanning the brush. Suddenly, the grass ahead rustled. I dropped into a slight crouch, muscles tensed, ready for a strike. A man popped out of the bushes. It was another hunter. I rolled my eyes. This was the 3rd person I'd seen, and I hadn't spotted a single beast yet. The outskirts were picked clean. I needed to go deeper. I didn't want to waste time walking. I jumped, my body leveling out parallel to the ground. I kicked off the very air itself. A loud boom echoed through the trees as I broke into a blur of speed. I looked like a human missile, flying dozens of meters in a single leap. I kicked the air again, accelerating, disappearing into the dark heart of the forest. 10 minutes later, I found my first target. It was 2 meters long with tusks like crescent moons. A shadow moon wolf. It was a low-level rank 1 beast. I remembered the pictures from my school textbooks instantly. The wolf's mouth dripped with saliva. Its glowing green eyes locked onto mine, sensing my blood chi. It seemed to pause, then a look of predatory joy crossed its face. To this wolf, I was the weakest human it had encountered all day. It let out a howl and lunged. It moved fast, its jaws aiming straight for my throat. My breathing quickened. My body tightened instinctively. That feeling, the thin line between life and death, sent a surge of adrenaline through me. My hands were actually shaking with excitement. As the wolf flew through the air, my mind became preternaturally clear. I didn't panic. I ducked low, sliding right under its belly as it passed over me. I saw an opening and didn't hesitate. I threw a punch. 9 thunderous cracks exploded in the air. My fist tore through the wolf's underside, leaving a gaping hole right through its body. The beast hit the ground hard. It didn't even twitch. It was dead in seconds. I let out a long breath, my heart racing with a grin. Then, the smell hit me. The wolf's saliva was revolting. Ugh, that's disgusting. I held my breath, stepped forward, and ripped the left ear off the carcass. I tossed it into my bag and kept moving. As I walked, I analyzed the fight. That duck, the way I moved, it was pure instinct. Before my breakthrough, my reactions were never that sharp. It was like my body knew exactly what to do before my brain even processed it. My talent, the eternal peerless, wasn't just about learning techniques. It had completely overhauled my combat instincts. I needed to test this more. I pushed deeper into the woods. It didn't take long to find a new opponent. A massive black bear stood in a clearing. A mid-level rank 1 beast, a raging black bear. Come on then, I said, beckoning with my finger. The bear lived up to its name. It roared, the sound shaking the leaves, and charged. It was like a small mountain moving toward me. I could feel the ground vibrating under its weight. It swung a massive paw at my head. I stepped back an inch. The claws whistled past my nose. For the next 10 minutes, I played with it. The bear swung, lunged, and bit, but it couldn't touch a single hair on my head. I moved like a ghost. When the bear finally stopped, huffing and exhausted, I was still standing there with a steady pulse. My clothes weren't even wrinkled. It was confirmed. My combat talent was off the charts. A mid-level beast couldn't even lay a finger on me. Test over, I muttered. I stepped forward. The bear tried to lift its paw one last time, but I was faster. I threw a punch that connected with its limb, followed by a blur of motion aimed at its head. Boom. The bear's head exploded. I jumped back quickly to avoid the mess. The massive body crashed down, shaking the earth. I walked up and took the ear. I was about to leave when I heard a sharp whistle behind me. Something was cutting through the air. I ducked instinctively. A long spear slammed into the ground exactly where my head had been a second ago. Oh, quick reflexes, a voice said. I looked back. A thin, scrawny man was pulling the spear out of the dirt. He had a nasty grin on his face. Kid, hand over the ears you've collected, he said, leveling the spear at my chest. Do it, and I might let you live. I stared at him, my expression flat. You're not hunting beasts? You're hunting other people. He let out a mockingly sharp laugh. Youngsters are so brainless. Why hunt beasts when I can just rob you? It's much faster. He shook the spear impatiently. Ears or your life. I'll give you 3 seconds. I looked at his weapon. A thought occurred to me. Is that an alloy spear? I asked. The man blinked, confused by the question. Of course it is. What grade? Which series? Wait, why the hell am I answering you? He realized I was stalling, and his face turned red with rage. You had your chance. Die. He lunged, the spear tip whistling toward my heart. I didn't move. I just smiled. I looked at the thin man and felt a pang of disappointment. Only a D-grade alloy spear? It was a low-tier model, but I supposed it would have to do for now. The scrawny man let out a cold laugh, stepping forward to drive the tip of his spear through my throat. But just as the cold metal was about to pierce my skin, his vision blurred. I moved faster than his eyes could follow. I struck his wrist, and his hand went numb instantly. He dropped the spear without even realizing it. Before he could react, I buried a kick deep into his chest. The force sent him flying backward. He crashed into the valley wall with a sickening thud and slid to the ground, coughing up a mouthful of thick, dark blood. He stared at me, his eyes wide and vacant, completely lost as to how the tables had turned so fast. "Not bad," I said, weighing the weapon in my hand. "An alloy weapon really is different. The balance, the hardness, it's leagues better than a standard spear." The man swallowed hard, the realization finally hitting him. He had picked a fight with a monster. "Listen, kid, I clearly underestimated you. The spear is yours. Consider it a gift. We're good, right?" "Is that so?" I gave him a small smile. "You're actually a pretty nice guy. Go ahead, you can leave." He forced a jagged smile, nodding frantically as he turned to walk away. I watched his back. I knew exactly what he was thinking. He was planning to find his friends and come back to kill me for humiliating him. He thought I was just some naive kid who fell for his act. Suddenly, a sound like a crashing tidal wave erupted from behind him. The man froze, sensing the sudden surge of power. He started to turn his head, but he wasn't fast enough. I swung the spear with everything I had. The shaft slammed into his chest, collapsing his ribcage instantly. He skipped across the dirt like a stone over water and crumpled a few yards away. You said I could go," he wheezed, clutching his shattered chest. He looked at me with pure disbelief as I walked toward him. I looked down at him and offered a bright, genuine smile. I lied. His eyes bulged with hatred. He tried to spit out one last curse, but I didn't give him the chance. I thrust the spear down, piercing his heart. His head hit the ground with a heavy thud, and the light faded from his eyes. I stood over him for a moment, waiting for the guilt to hit me. It didn't. There was no racing heart, no nausea, no hesitation. I had changed. Killing felt as natural as breathing now. I noticed a backpack slung over his shoulder. I opened it up and whistled. There were at least 20 left ears from various beasts inside. He was right about one thing. Robbing people was definitely the fastest way to get rich. I tucked the loot away, though I knew I wouldn't make a habit of this. I wasn't going to hunt people who hadn't crossed me, but I wasn't going to let a windfall go to waste either. I started to walk away, then slapped my forehead. I forgot to search his pockets. I went back and did a thorough sweep, but found nothing else of value. I'd have to remember to be more professional next time. As I hiked deeper into the woods, I pulled up my system panel. I had 38 martial points. Without a second thought, I dumped all of them into my blood chi. A familiar surge of heat raced through my veins. My blood chi climbed from 95.2 to 99. I was only 1 point away from becoming a rank 1 martial artist. I couldn't wait. Breaking through didn't just mean more power. It meant I could finally start practicing advanced cultivation techniques. I looked at my new D-grade spear. With this, I could finally push my Raging Sea Spear technique from the great success realm to perfection. I spent the rest of the day hunting until I found a secluded cave. I rolled a massive boulder over the entrance to block it and started a small fire. It was time. I had 32 martial points banked. I licked my lips and funneled the points into my blood chi. The moment the number hit 102.2, my body convulsed. My blood felt like a literal tidal wave crashing through my arteries. My skin turned beet red, steam rising from my pores as if I were a furnace. Crack! My muscles swelled so violently that my sleeves tore open, exposing arms corded with thick, pulsing veins. After a few minutes, the explosive growth settled. My frame leaned back out, returning to its usual slender shape, but beneath the surface, I felt condensed power. I was officially a rank 1 martial artist. I squeezed my fist, feeling a level of strength that made my previous self look like a child. This feeling, the sensation of becoming something more, was addictive. Over the next 4 days, I became a ghost in the forest. I hunted relentlessly. My Raging Sea Spear technique reached the perfection realm. Now, every time I thrust the spear, the air itself roared like a tsunami. I could shatter the spine of a mid-tier rank 1 beast with a single strike. By the end of the 4th day, I didn't look like a student anymore. My eyes were cold and sharp. I moved with the calculated grace of a veteran predator. I came to a halt in a clearing. Ahead of me, A massive black serpent, nearly 30 meters long, flicked its tongue. A black jade python. Even among high-tier rank 1 beasts, this thing was at the top of the food chain. It was the most dangerous thing I had encountered so far. The python's tail whipped out like a crack of thunder. I didn't try to block it. That would be suicide. I leaped high into the air as the tail shattered a boulder where I had just been standing. Mid-air, I lunged. My spear moved like a streak of lightning, driving straight into the python's left eye. Blood sprayed everywhere. The beast let out a silent, agonizing scream and went into a frenzy. It lashed out blindly, but I had already retracted my spear and vanished. I used my void step technique to close the gap again, blinding its other eye before it could track me. Now the monster was helpless, thrashing at shadows. I didn't rush in for the kill. I stayed back, picking it apart bit by bit, wearing its stamina down for 15 minutes until it couldn't even lift its tail. Finally, I stepped in and ended it. My heart was thumping against my ribs. It looked easy, but one mistake would have meant a crushed ribcage. Thanks to my peerless talent, buff, my combat instincts were becoming terrifyingly sharp. I looked at the mountain of scales before me. Wait, I muttered, frowning. This thing doesn't have ears. I searched the carcass until I spotted a single scale on its forehead that glowed brighter than the rest. I pried it out. Even my alloy spear couldn't leave a scratch on it. This was my trophy. This was my proof. This special scale would make incredible armor. It was likely worth a fortune. I thought about it for a second, then dug out a regular scale to use as my official proof for killing the black jade python. I didn't want to show my hand too early. I grabbed my heavy backpack, which was already bulging with beast ears, and turned to leave. I had been in this forest for 4 days. I couldn't even remember how many beasts I'd killed, at least several dozen. My bag was nearly full. It was time to head back and settle the score. As I walked toward the edge of the forest, I ran into several groups of martial artists. Their eyes flashed with greed when they saw the size of my pack. But then they saw me. I was covered in dried monster blood, and my eyes were cold. They weighed their options and decided to stay back. Anyone who could pack a bag that full was someone they didn't want to provoke. Then, 5 people appeared in my path. It was a martial artist squad, all carrying heavy packs. I recognized the leader immediately, a young man named Yifeng. I didn't want any trouble, so I frowned and prepared to take a different route. Yifeng's eyes lit up when he saw me. "Stop right there," he shouted. I didn't slow down. I kept walking. Yifeng's expression darkened. He waved a hand toward the 4 men with him. "Young Master Yi, he's just a kid. Let me handle this." A middle-aged man stepped forward, eager to please. He had been having the time of his life following Yifeng these past few days. They hadn't been hunting, they had been robbing. Many squads stronger than them had simply handed over their loot to avoid trouble with Yifeng's family. This man hadn't killed a single beast himself, yet his bag was overflowing. Seeing me ignore his boss, the man lunged forward. "I'll teach you some manners." Yifeng nodded. "Fine. Break his legs. Don't kill him yet." The man blurred into motion, closing the gap in seconds. He swung a massive fist at my back. I felt it coming long before he reached me. I spun around in one fluid motion. My spear flashed out like a serpent's tongue, piercing straight through the man's heart. He froze. He looked down at the spearhead buried in his chest, his throat working as he tried to speak. Only a wet, gurgling sound came out. I ripped the spear back. He collapsed into the dirt like a sack of flour, dead before he hit the ground. I paused. I looked at the bag of beast ears he was carrying. Without a second thought, I grabbed it and vanished into the thick brush of the forest. It happened so fast. Yifeng and his remaining 3 men stood there, paralyzed. In the blink of an eye, a rank 1 martial artist was dead. That guy, he was a certified rank 1. One of them stammered, eyes wide with shock. They looked at the spot where I had disappeared with newfound terror. "Damn it! You dare kill my man." Yifeng finally snapped out of it, his face flushing red with rage. "And he took the bag. You're dead meat." He turned to the others. "After him. Kill him." The 3 martial artists hesitated. Their strength was roughly the same as the man I had just gutted. I had killed him with a single thrust. Even if he was careless, it took serious power to do that. Plus, at my age, I was clearly a genius from Xingqing High School. Robbing people was one thing, but murdering a top student? If the school found out, they were finished. Young Master Yi, one of them whispered. He's probably a genius from the high school. If we kill him. Yifeng turned on him, his eyes murderous. The man shut his mouth instantly. So what if he's a genius? Yifeng sneered. This is the wilderness. We kill him, throw him to the beasts, and no one finds a thing. Move. They started the chase, but they quickly realized something. I was faster, much faster. As the gap widened, Yifeng's frustration boiled over. Kid, he screamed at my retreating back. I've memorized your face. Drop the bag now, or I'll kill your entire family. I stopped. My boots skidded in the dirt as I turned my head. My eyes burned with a sudden, violent light. He had tried to rob me. I had defended myself, and now he was threatening my family? He just signed his death warrant. I didn't say a word. I turned back and accelerated, disappearing into the shadows of the trees. Shit! Yifeng cursed, kicking a tree. The three martial artists stayed silent, trembling. After a few minutes of venting, Yifeng turned back toward the forest exit. Follow me. He has to go back to the base to settle his points. We'll intercept him at the entrance. One of the men looked at the darkening sky. Young Master Yi, it's night. The beasts get more aggressive. Maybe we should wait until morning. No, Yifeng growled. If he travels through the night, he'll escape. We move now. They began the trek toward the edge of the forest. The whole way, Yifeng kept cursing my name. The other three were miserable too. They had been enjoying an easy trip, and now they were forced to march through a dangerous forest at night because of me. If I see him again, I'll be the first to kill him, one of them muttered. That dead guy was a fool for being so careless. They were so busy complaining that they didn't notice the shadow in the trees. Suddenly, I burst from the brush. My spear was a blur. Before they could even scream, I drove the tip through the heart of the man who had just spoken. I didn't linger. I pulled the spear out and vanished back into the darkness before the body even hit the ground. It was a perfect ambush. Damn it, it's him again, Yifeng shrieked. He couldn't believe it. I hadn't run away. I had been hunting them from the shadows. Looking at their teammate's fresh corpse, the remaining two men felt the hair on their necks stand up. The forest suddenly felt very cold. Fast. Move faster. Yifeng swallowed hard, his voice shaking. Get out of this hellhole. They stopped talking. They moved in a tight formation, eyes darting everywhere, waiting for me to strike again. Every rustle of leaves felt like a spear at their throats. Suddenly, a thunderous boom echoed through the trees. The three of them froze, their nerves stretched to the breaking point. They stared into the darkness for 10 long seconds, waiting for the killing blow. The silence stretched on, but no one charged out of the brush. I was playing with them, and they knew it. Don't let me catch you, you little rat, Yifeng hissed, his teeth grinding together. Damn it, all you do is sneak around. If you have the guts, come out and fight like a man. He glanced at the man beside him. Right, brother? The martial artist muttered a curse, his voice trembling with a hint of terror. But when he finished speaking, there was no response from the third man. Yifeng and the survivor froze. A cold dread pooled in my stomach as I watched them from the dark. Then came the sound they feared most, a heavy thud. They spun around, and their hair stood on end. Another teammate was down, throat opened, blood soaking into the dirt. Damn it all, Yifeng shrieked. He was losing his mind, screaming into the void to mask his fear. The last remaining guard grabbed his arm, pulling him back. Young Master Yi, stop shouting. We have to go. Now. Yifeng shut his mouth instantly. They didn't look back. They just bolted. But they didn't get more than a few steps before they slammed to a halt. I was standing right there in the middle of the path, spear in hand, waiting for them. When Yifeng saw me, he actually let out a sigh of relief. The tension left his shoulders, replaced by a murderous sneer. You little trash. Done hiding. The other guard glared at me, his body tensed, terrified I might vanish into the shadows again. I looked at them both with cold eyes. To me, they were already dead. There are only 2 of you left, I said softly. I don't need to sneak anymore. Yifeng had threatened to kill my entire family. I wasn't going to let him die quickly. You think you've won? Yifeng laughed, though it sounded forced. Who do you think you are? Before the words fully left his mouth, he lunged. The guard followed right behind him. I didn't flinch. I stepped forward, my spear moving like a dragon emerging from the sea. The tip of my spear collided with Yifeng's strike. The impact sent a shock wave through the air. Yifeng's face paled. He let out a muffled groan and stumbled back several steps. He looked at me with newfound gravity. He was a high-stage rank 1 martial artist, yet I had pushed him back with a single thrust. I didn't give him time to recover. I pivoted, lunging at the guard while Yifeng was off balance. My spear work was wide and aggressive, suffocating his every move. Within seconds, I found the opening and drove the blade home. I yanked the spear back with a wet snap, flicking the blood off the tip onto the grass. Yifeng's expression turned hideous. In just a few hours, his 5-man squad had been whittled down to just him. "Your turn," I said, walking toward him step by step. "You think you've got me?" Yifeng smirked as I reached the 3-meter mark. Suddenly, he thrust a finger forward. A sharp, concentrated burst of energy shot toward my chest at blinding speed. My instinct screamed. I twisted my body mid-air, the energy grazing my shoulder. It slammed into a massive tree behind me, snapping the trunk like a dry twig. I stared at the splintered wood, my heart racing. That power was no joke. B-grade martial skill, void-piercing finger, Yifeng bragged, regaining his confidence. His uncle, the base commander, had taught him that move before they left. Even though he had only mastered the basics, it gave him the power to punch far above his weight class. He thought I was just some poor kid with no access to high-level skills. He thought he could overwhelm me with raw technique. "I told you, as long as you were hiding like a rat, I couldn't do much," he barked. "But you came out. You're dead." He began firing off bursts of energy, one after another. White streaks of power tore through the air, forcing me to dodge and weave. I couldn't get close. "A peasant is always just a peasant," he mocked, seeing me on the defensive. But he wasn't paying attention to my eyes. Every time he fired a finger, I was watching. I was memorizing the flow of his energy, the position of his hands, and the rhythm of the release. A few minutes passed. Yifeng fired again, and this time, I acted like I was exhausted. My reaction was a split second too slow. "Die," he yelled, a grin spreading across his face. Then he froze. I stood my ground and mirrored his exact stance. I pointed my finger and released. A bolt of energy, identical to his, shot from my fingertip. The two blasts collided in midair, exploding with a deafening boom that neutralized both. What is this?" Yifeng stammered, his face twisting in disbelief. "How do you know the void-piercing finger?" He fired again, desperate. I fired back, my mind racing as I refined the technique in real time. Yifeng's eyes went wide. He screamed in pure terror. "You're learning it? Right now?" It had taken him a month of intense coaching just to learn the basics. His uncle had called him a genius for it. And here I was, mastering it in the middle of a life-and-death struggle. I saw the moment his spirit broke. He realized he wasn't fighting a student. He was fighting a monster. He turned to run, firing desperate shots behind him to keep me back. But I was faster. I pointed my finger, and this time, the energy was twice as thick as before. My bolt shattered his defense and tore straight through his thigh. He lost his balance and crashed into the dirt, howling. "Proficient level," he whispered, his voice trembling with pure horror. "How are you at the proficient level already?" He looked at me like I was a ghost. I didn't answer. I just raised my hand again. "Don't kill me," he begged, cold sweat pouring down his face. "My uncle will hunt you down. I'll give you the manual. It's right here on me. You're a genius. I'll never bother you again." "If I kill you," I interrupted quietly, "the manual is mine anyway." I didn't wait for his next plea. I fired several bursts in quick succession, piercing his brow and his heart. He went limp. It was over. He had threatened my family, and in my world, that was a death sentence. I shook my head, feeling the new power humming in my fingertips. If I hadn't learned that skill on the fly, this might have actually been difficult. I knelt down and began searching the bodies. My movements weren't clumsy like they were on the first day. By now, I was getting very good at this. I reached into Yifeng's jacket and pulled out a small, weathered manual. My eyes widened as I read the title. It was a B-grade martial technique called void-piercing finger. I felt a surge of genuine joy. Even though I had the peerless talent, my actual cultivation was still at the entry level. I had managed to push the technique to the proficient stage during our fight through sheer intuition, which was already a miracle. If I had more time, I could have deduced the rest on my own, but having the actual manual was a massive shortcut. Nothing beats having the source material right in front of you. I spent a few minutes flipping through the pages, memorizing the flow of energy and the specific finger positions. Once the movements were burned into my mind, I turned my attention to the loot. Near Yifeng's body sat 5 large tactical backpacks, stuffed to the brim with monster ears. Every single one of them held more than my own bag. By the time I finished packing everything, the sky was beginning to pale with the first light of dawn. I stepped out of the dense forest, carrying 6 massive, bulging backpacks. I looked like a walking mountain of gear. Suddenly, a massive black bear burst from the brush, roaring as it lunged at me with razor-sharp claws. I didn't even flinch. I looked up and pointed a single finger. Void-piercing finger. A beam of white energy, thick as a man's arm, erupted from my fingertip. It whistled through the air and punched a clean hole straight through the bear's heart. The beast collapsed instantly. I felt a thrill run through me. Proficient stage? No, I was pushing toward mastery now. The power of a B-grade technique was no joke. My effective range had increased drastically, and the speed of the attack was incredible. It was the perfect trump card. In a real fight, the enemy wouldn't even see it coming. As the silhouette of the martial arts base appeared in the distance, I slowed my pace. I looked down at the void-piercing finger manual in my hand and hesitated. Yi Feng, the man I just killed, was the nephew of the base commander, a rank 3 martial artist. That was a level of power I couldn't provoke yet. If I were caught with this manual, I was a dead man. I took a deep breath, struck a flint, and watched the paper curl and blacken in the flames. I didn't need the physical book anymore. I had already reached the perfect stage of the technique in my mind. With the evidence turned to ash, I hoisted the 6 bags and walked toward the base. The sun was just rising, but the base was already crawling with people. Hunters were returning from the wilderness, lining up at the settlement counter to cash in their kills. I saw a group called the Thunder Squad handing over 4 bags. They were well known around here, and a crowd had gathered to watch. 67 low-tier rank 1 ears, 12 mid-tier, total value, 230,000 credits, the clerk announced. The surrounding martial artists whistled in admiration. Thunder Squad is insane, someone muttered. 4 full bags in 3 days. That's more than I make in 3 months. Even the clerk smiled. You guys are the most productive team I've seen this week. The members of the Thunder Squad grinned, their chests puffed out with pride. But their moment of glory didn't last long. Holy crap, look at that! A voice screamed from the entrance. Everyone turned. I walked into the plaza, my clothes soaked in dried monster blood, looking like I'd crawled out of a meat grinder. But it wasn't my appearance that stopped them. It was the 6 massive backpacks hanging off me, dripping blood onto the pavement. Are those all monster ears? Someone whispered. 6 bags? How many did he kill? He's just a kid. He looks like a high schooler. Is he some kind of hidden genius? The Thunder Squad smiles vanished. One of them scoffed. They're probably all just low-level trash monsters. Quantity doesn't mean quality. Even if they are, another countered, he's alone. Look at him. He's one person with 6 bags. I ignored the whispers and walked straight to the counter. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. The clerk, who had been somewhat casual with the others, stood up straight. He looked at my blood-stained face and then at the mountain of bags. Sir, please, let me help you with those, he said, his voice dripping with respect. He unzipped the first one and dumped it out. A pile of ears hit the floor, forming a small hill. The crowd gasped. Angry Black Bear. Moonwolf. My God, these are all rank 1. I don't see a single unranked ear. Not one. The clerk didn't stop. He grabbed the other 5 bags and emptied them all. Soon, the entire floor around the station was covered in a sea of monster trophies. There are mid-tier rank 1s in here. And high tiers too, a veteran hunter yelled, his voice trembling. This kid is a monster. The Thunder Squad stood frozen. They looked like they had just swallowed a fly. But then, someone spotted something shiny in the pile. Wait, is that a black jade python scale? The crowd went silent. The black jade python was the king of rank 1 monsters. Most squads ran the other way if they saw one. The clerk picked up the obsidian-like scale, examining it with wide eyes. "It is," he whispered. "He actually killed a black jade python." The Thunder Squad looked like they wanted to disappear. They had almost been wiped out by one of those last month. And here was a teenager who had taken one down solo. The clerk looked at me, his hands shaking slightly. "The black jade python has a unique crystal scale on its forehead. Did you happen to find it?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out a translucent, shimmering scale. "Yes," the clerk shouted, his eyes lighting up. "The base has a standing bounty for these. We'll buy it at a premium. Are you willing to sell?" "How much?" I asked. He held up a single finger. 10,000 blue star credits. I blinked. A high-tier rank 1 ear was only worth 5,000. This single scale was worth double that. Given how hard that snake was to kill, it made sense. "Deal," I said. "Let me count these first," the clerk said, his voice straining to stay professional. "I'll settle the total in a moment." He began sorting through the mountain of monster left ears I had dumped on the floor. As he reached the end of the pile, he looked up at me, his eyes filled with genuine shock. He cleared his throat and announced the final tally. 72 low-tier, rank 1 monsters. 83 mid-tier, rank 1s. 17 high-tier, rank 1s. Including the black jade python scale and the premium bounty, the clerk stammered. The total value comes to 416,000 blue star credits. The entire hall erupted. 41,000? Someone yelled. "I couldn't kill that many monsters in 6 months. I'm only a low-tier rank 1, another hunter whispered. "At my pace, that would take me 2.5 years. Is this what a real genius looks like?" The crowd was buzzing. They couldn't wrap their heads around the fact that I had done this entirely alone. The Thunder Squad stood there, shaking their heads in disbelief. Whatever competitive spark they had earlier was gone. They were completely humbled. Their entire 5-person team had only brought in 23,000 credits. I had doubled their haul by myself. The transaction went through quickly. I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. I pulled it out, confirmed the 416,000 credits had hit my account, and turned to leave. The crowd of martial artists instinctively parted, creating a wide path for me to walk through. Suddenly, a massive bang echoed through the hall. A figure shattered a second-story window and leaped down, landing with a heavy thud. "Nobody moves," he roared. "Staff, lock down the base. Don't let a single fly out of here." Silence fell over the room. The man shouting was Yi Chi, one of the base's high-ranking supervisors. The workers scrambled to block every exit. "Manager Yi, what's happening?" a hunter asked cautiously. Yi Chi stood in the center of the room, his eyes cold and predatory. "My nephew, Yi Feng, has been murdered," he hissed. The crowd gasped. Yi Feng was dead? I saw several hunters biting their lips, trying to hide their smiles. Yi Feng had spent the last few weeks robbing almost everyone in the wilderness. If it weren't for his uncle's position, someone would have killed him a long time ago. To most people here, his death was a cause for celebration. "Everyone will be searched," Yi Chi declared. "Once you're cleared, you can leave." The mood shifted instantly. "Searched? On what grounds?" someone shouted. "Just because your nephew died doesn't mean you can treat us like criminals." Yi Chi let out a cold snort that cut through the protests. A murderous aura radiated from him. Yi Feng was carrying a B-grade skill book. Whoever killed him definitely took it. Until that book is found, nobody leaves. A B-grade skill? The hunters traded looks of greed and surprise. Yi Chi was clearly loaded if he gave his nephew something that valuable. Despite the grumbling, no one dared to resist further. Yi Chi looked like he was ready to kill anyone who spoke up. As the staff began the searches, Yi Chi stood by like a hawk, watching every movement. His eyes eventually drifted toward the settlement counter, landing on the massive pile of monster ears I had brought in. "Who killed all of these?" Yi Chi asked sharply. Every eye in the room turned to me. Yi Chi's oppressive gaze followed. When he saw how young I was, he looked surprised. Then his expression soured into a deep scowl. "A low-tier rank 1 student killed this many monsters." He stepped toward me, his voice dropping to a dangerous chill. "I think you killed my nephew, stole his loot, and had the gall to come back here to cash it in. You've got a lot of nerve." The other hunters looked at me with pity. Yi Chi signaled to a staff member. "Search him. Now." As the man approached, I didn't move my body, but I leveled my spear, the tip stopping inches from the staff member's chest. He froze. The room went dead silent. Nobody expected me to fight back. You dare resist? Yi Chi growled, stepping forward with lethal intent. I am a student at Xingqing High School, I said, my voice flat and emotionless. That single sentence made Yi Chi pause. He looked at my young face, then back at the mountain of trophies. A flicker of hesitation crossed his eyes. A student from the top high school who could kill this many monsters was a top-tier genius. He didn't care about offending the average hunter, but if he harassed a future powerhouse, it could come back to haunt him. His tone softened, though only slightly. My nephew is dead. I have to conduct this search. But I won't make you do it for nothing. Cooperate, give me some face, and I'll give you 10,000 credits as compensation. How about it? I furrowed my brow, acting like I was annoyed and insulted. I stayed silent, pretending to weigh my options. Yi Chi held up 3 fingers. 30,000. Fine, I muttered, nodding slowly. The staff searched me thoroughly. They went through my bags and my clothes, but they found nothing. The worker looked at Yi Chi and shook his head. All right, go. Yi Chi sighed, waving me off. He signaled for someone to transfer the 30,000 credits to my account. I didn't rush out. To keep up the act of being an arrogant, unbothered student, I took my time. I went to the locker rooms, took a long shower, and changed into a fresh set of clothes before finally heading toward the exit. Seeing me so relaxed, even stopping for a shower, finally convinced Yi Chi. He turned his attention back to the others. Next, nobody leaves until I'm satisfied. As I walked out of the base, my heart was hammering against my ribs. I had played it perfectly. Thank God I was cautious enough to burn that B-grade skill book after I memorized it. If I had kept it, I'd be dead right now. Yi Chi wouldn't have cared about my school status if he'd found the evidence. He probably couldn't imagine that someone could master a B-grade technique to the perfect realm in just a few hours while walking back from the forest. I hailed a taxi and watched the base disappear in the rearview mirror. I was officially a rank 1 martial artist now. My first stop was the Martial Arts Association. I needed to pass the official exam and get my hands on a cultivation manual. Plus, being a registered martial artist meant a monthly government stipend. I opened my status panel to check my progress. Name, Su Hong. Talent, Eternal Peerless. Blood Chi, 103. Mental Power, 23. Constitution, Mortal Body, 6%. Skills, Sea of Rage Spear, Success. Thunder Fist, Perfect. Vajra Fist, Perfect. Floating Light Palm, Perfect. Sky Step, Perfect. My blood chi had jumped by 0.8 points in just 4 days. It made sense. I had spent every waking hour fighting for my life. But what really shocked me was my constitution. It had gone from 3% to 6%. I hadn't looked closely when I broke through to rank 1, but the progress was undeniable. I was getting stronger, faster than I ever thought possible. I realized my constitution had only grown by 3%. That small jump must have come from breaking through to a rank 1 martial artist. I stared at the panel, feeling a bit speechless. A major breakthrough in rank only moved the needle by 3%. Without my system to add points, reaching 100% would be impossible. It made sense why special constitutions were so rare. Every martial artist dreamed of having one, and I was no exception. I needed to test how many martial points it took to increase that percentage. I also noticed my mental power hadn't budged at all. I sighed. It seemed I truly had no natural talent for that. I would have to rely entirely on my system. I looked at my accumulated martial points. After 4 days of nonstop hunting, I had reached a record high of 534 points. To put that in perspective, a rank 1 early-stage martial artist needs 100 blood chi, while a mid-stage needs 200. If I dumped everything into blood chi, I'd gain 53.4 points. I was only 40 points away from hitting the mid-stage. But looking at my constitution and mental power, I felt a wave of frustration. These points looked like a lot, but they weren't going to be enough. I decided to test my theory. I put 1 point into my constitution. The number flickered, changing from 6% to 6.1%. Immediately, I felt a tiny surge of strength. It was small, but it was there. This was a direct boost to my combat power. I realized then that constitution was vital. Blood chi was just a measure of rank, but Constitution determined how hard I could actually hit. The exchange rate was steep, 10 points for 1% of Constitution. I tried adding a point to mental power. It went from 23 to 23.1. Another 10 to 1 ratio. I did the math in my head. To get my Constitution to 100%, I needed 939 more points. As for mental power, I didn't even know how much I needed to awaken as a mentalist. I'd have to research that later. I decided on a plan. Increasing my Constitution was my top priority because it provided immediate power. I dumped 300.5 points into it. My progress jumped from 6.1% to 36.1%. Suddenly, while sitting in the front seat of the taxi, my body convulsed. It felt just like my initial breakthrough. My muscles bulged violently, straining against my clothes. My veins popped, and I could hear the fabric of my shirt groaning, ready to tear. I grew larger in seconds. I went from a lean, handsome youth to a massive, muscular tank. With my youthful face and this new, hulking frame, I looked completely absurd. The taxi driver almost lost control of the car. He looked over, eyes wide with terror, his lips trembling. Big brother, what did I do? Just tell me, I'll change. He was terrified, but to his credit, he kept the car steady. I couldn't answer him yet. I felt an explosion of raw power coursing through me. I was leagues stronger than I had been just moments ago. I felt like I could take on a dozen versions of my past self at once. After a moment, I adjusted. The massive muscles settled and smoothed out, and I returned to my normal, lean appearance. I made a mental note to buy stretchable clothes. If I kept doing this, I'd end up naked in public. I'm fine, sorry about that, I said, giving the driver an apologetic smile. If you're okay, I'm okay, he gasped, finally exhaling. I had scared the life out of him. I went back to my points. I put 200 points into blood chi, raising it from 103 to 123. Perhaps because of my improved constitution, I felt no discomfort from the sudden surge. I had 34 points left. I dumped them all into mental power, bringing it to 26.5. My mind cleared instantly, and the exhaustion from days of hunting vanished. The Martial Arts Association was located in a massive skyscraper in the city center. I hopped out of the taxi and headed inside. I asked the receptionist for the testing area and started walking toward the hall. Teacher, my talent isn't bad, right? I broke through to rank 1 right on schedule. I froze. The voice was familiar. I turned and saw Li Ming and his master, Jiang Ming, walking toward me. I didn't want a confrontation, so I looked away and kept walking. Li Ming's breakthrough didn't concern me. Wait, that guy's back looks familiar, Li Ming muttered, frowning at my retreating figure. He couldn't quite place where he'd seen me. He shook it off and asked for directions. When the receptionist pointed him toward the same hall I was entering, he paused. That kid is going to the rank 1 exam too. At his age. Jiang Ming was also surprised, but he used it as a teaching moment. See? Don't be arrogant. You think you're special for breaking through. But that kid looks like he's still in high school, and he's at the same level. Li Ming scoffed. I just started training late. If I had started at his age, I'd be way ahead of him. Besides, martial arts is about combat power. With my mastery of Thunder Fist, I could take down students like him with one punch. Jiang Ming sighed. His disciple's ego was becoming a problem again. Li Ming had been humbled after losing in the underground fights, but this new breakthrough had brought back all his arrogance. He wanted to tell Li Ming that there was always someone better, but he knew Li Ming wouldn't listen. If he pushed too hard, Li Ming might even try to pick a fight with the boy just to prove a point. Enough talk, Jiang Ming said. Go take your exam. I reached the testing area, and a staff member told me to wait. I looked around at the other candidates. They were almost all middle-aged men. They stared back at me, their faces filled with shock. I could see the question in their eyes. What was a kid this young doing at a rank 1 martial artist exam? The middle-aged martial artists around me stared with envy. This wasn't their first time attempting the rank 1 exam. Most of them had failed multiple times before, and I could feel their frustration radiating off them. Suddenly, Li Ming and his master Jiang Ming walked into the hall. Li Ming caught me looking at him and let out a cold, dismissive snort. His master had used me as a lecture point earlier, and I could tell Li Ming was itching to see me fail. He wanted to prove that a kid like me didn't belong here. A staff member stepped forward and called us to order. The The rules were simple. We needed a blood chi measurement of at least 100 points. After that, we had 3 attempts at the strength testing machine. To pass, the average of those 3 strikes had to exceed 1,000 points. The middle-aged men rushed to the front to go first. The first candidate stepped up. His blood chi hit 102, but his strikes were 992, 994, and 1,003. He failed. The tension in the room spiked instantly. I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes to stay focused and calm. Li Ming watched the failures with pure disdain. Beside him, Jiang Ming remained expressionless. To him, this was just a formality. He knew Li Ming would pass. His only curiosity was whether I was actually prepared or just a kid trying my luck. Even then, he didn't expect much. He actually hoped I might perform well enough to humble his arrogant student, but he doubted anyone off the street could outshine the disciple he had personally trained. By the time the group of older men finished, only 3 out of a dozen had passed. They didn't leave, though. They gathered in a corner, whispering about whether the young man and the kid would make it. The older one has a teacher with him, one whispered. He's a sure thing. But that kid? He's probably just here to test the waters. Even if he fails, being here at his age makes him a genius. I ignored them, but Li Ming's face darkened. Hearing them call me a genius while ignoring him clearly stung. He marched up to the machines to start his test. The room went quiet. He hit 105 on the blood chi test. Pass. Then he moved to the strength machine. He took a deep breath and threw a punch. The machine let out a sharp, explosive crack. The numbers on the display blurred before freezing. 1,763. No way, someone shouted. 105 blood chi, and he hit 1,763? That's close to a mid-stage rank 1. He must be using at least a C-grade technique. The older men looked devastated. They were in their 40s and couldn't even break 1,000, yet this young man had nearly doubled it on his first try. Li Ming smirked, fueled by their shock. He threw 2 more punches, 1,721 and 1,690. The staff member stared at the screen, blinked, and then officially announced his pass. Li Ming walked back toward me, his chest puffed out. The older crowd watched him with a mix of awe and fear. They could sense the hostility he was radiating toward me. I opened my eyes, but I didn't even look at him. I walked straight past him toward the blood chi tester. He scoffed at the snub, crossing his arms to watch my failure. Jiang Ming sighed, already planning to find a real genius at one of the local high schools to put Li Ming in his place later. Then, a collective gasp ripped through the room. What the? Is the machine broken? The older men were bug-eyed, staring at the display. Li Ming froze, his mind going completely blank. Jiang Ming's eyes widened as he shoved his way forward to see the screen. He rubbed his eyes, praying he was hallucinating. Blood chi, 123. The room went deathly silent. Jiang Ming took a sharp breath. This kid was over a dozen points higher than Li Ming. Where did a monster like this come from? Li Ming's face turned a sickly shade of pale. He felt like a clown, remembering how he had just tried to show off. Blood chi isn't everything. Li Ming hissed under his breath, his eyes fixed on me. Combat power is what matters. The staff member finally found his voice. Blood chi test passed. Proceed to the strength test. Every eye in the building followed me as I stepped up to the punching target. I felt a surge of anticipation. After my recent breakthroughs, I wanted to know exactly what I was capable of. Since I had 3 tries, I decided to keep it simple for the first one. No techniques, just pure, raw strength. I took a breath, coiled my spine like a hunting tiger, and exploded forward. My fist slammed into the target. Boom. The sound was deafening. The massive, heavy testing machine didn't just vibrate, it was blasted off its base. It slid 10 meters across the floor, wobbling violently before crashing onto its side with a heavy thud. Complete silence followed. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Li Ming's face was ghostly white. His full-power strike hadn't even made the machine budge, let alone move a centimeter. I had just sent the entire unit flying across the room. The staff member scrambled over, trembling, trying to right the heavy machine. He managed to tilt it up enough to see the screen. He froze. His hands lost their grip, and the machine slammed back down onto the floor with a loud clang. He didn't even notice. He just stood there, staring into space. The staff member's eyes were glued to the screen. His shoulders trembled. A stuttering, disbelief-filled voice escaped his lips. "My God, is this real?" The other martial artists in the lobby couldn't contain their curiosity anymore. They surged forward, shouting for the man to move out of the way. "Oh, sorry," the staff member stammered, snapping out of his daze and scrambling to the side. The screen was finally revealed to the crowd. A group of veteran martial artists, along with Jiang Ming and his student Li Ming, all froze. The world seemed to stop as they stared at the glowing digits. Combat power, 1862. The air in the room turned heavy. The expressions on their faces were priceless. One of the older martial artists rubbed his eyes, his voice cracking. "Holy crap, 1862? That's way higher than the kid who just went." "Terrifying," another whispered. "I thought Li Ming was the genius of the century, but there's always a bigger fish." Li Ming didn't even look angry about being surpassed. He was beyond that. He just stared at the screen, his hands shaking uncontrollably. He had always prided himself on being a prodigy, but in this moment, he felt a crushing sense of defeat. Jiang Ming was just as stunned. He looked at my back, his eyes filled with shock. But then, a sharp realization hit one of the middle-aged martial artists. "Wait," the man shouted, his voice trembling. "That kid, I don't think he used a single martial technique just now." The room went dead silent again. Everyone replayed the scene in their heads. I hadn't used a stance, a breathing rhythm, or a specialized strike. It was just a straight punch. The sound of collective gasps filled the air. They looked at me like I was a monster. To hit over 1800 with pure, raw physical strength, without the multiplier of a technique, was unheard of. It was higher than Li Ming's best effort using his specialized tin-slash style. Jiang Ming felt a cold chill climb up his spine. His entire body went stiff. Li Ming's legs finally gave out, and his vision went dark as he slumped onto the floor. "First test complete," the staff member said, swallowing hard. He looked at me with newfound reverence. "Please begin the second test." The crowd leaned in. If I could do that with raw strength, what would happen if I actually used a technique? How high could that number possibly go? I took a deep breath, feeling satisfied. The vast body, refinement had increased my power far more than I expected. Most people couldn't control the inherent strength of their constitution, but I could. If I kept progressing, I might eventually be able to crush higher-ranked opponents with my bare hands. "Time to test my limit," I muttered. I adjusted my breathing and focused every ounce of my energy into a single point. I didn't hold back. I struck the target with everything I had. Broken void. A terrifying surge of energy exploded from my fist. The testing target let out a structural groan, unable to handle the pressure. Then, with a violent crack, the heavy padding and the internal mechanism literally shattered. The crowd's jaws dropped. I had destroyed the machine. The numbers on the display didn't just climb, they skyrocketed. They blurred past 2,000 in a heartbeat and finally settled on a staggering figure. Combat power, 3,004. I knew the standard for a rank 1 high-stage martial artist was 3,000 points. I was only at the beginning stage, yet my destructive power already rivaled someone at the peak of rank 1. "I'm dreaming. I have to be," one of the veterans muttered. "A monster. He's an absolute monster." The expressions around me were distorted with shock and awe. Jiang Ming's voice went up several octaves. 3,004? That's the threshold for the high stage. How is this possible for a beginner? He swallowed hard, a thought occurring to him. In top-tier cities like Modu, there were rare geniuses born with special constitutions. Their combat power was always off the charts, allowing them to end fights in a single blow. Seeing that I hit 1,800 without a technique, Jiang Ming was now convinced I was one of those rare bloodlines. He looked down at Li Ming, who was still sitting on the floor with a hollow, soulless expression. Jiang Ming had wanted to find someone to humble his arrogant student, but this wasn't humbling. This was soul-crushing. He quickly stepped over and slapped Li Ming across the face to snap him out of it. "Wake up, Li Ming. This kid is a freak of nature with a special constitution. It's normal to lose to someone like that. Don't lose your mind over it. Focus on the upcoming monthly exams at Xingqing High, not on comparing yourself to a monster." Meanwhile, I looked at the smoking wreck of the testing machine and felt a bit awkward. I looked at the staff member. Do I have to pay for that? The staff member blinked, finally finding his voice. No, of course not. The target is broken, I said, pointing at the debris. Do you need to fix it so I can do the third round? No need, he shouted, shaking his head frantically. Why would he fix it just to watch me blow it up again? You've passed the assessment. You're done. At that same moment, in the top-floor office of the Xingqing Martial Arts Association, the branch president, Wu Linxian, was staring at her phone. She looked stressed. People thought being the president was all glory, but she knew the truth. If Xingqing didn't produce some brilliant results this year, her career was over. The college entrance exams were approaching. Presidents from other cities were constantly bragging in their group chats about the geniuses they had discovered. Xingqing usually ranked near the bottom in Jiangnan province. We had a few talents, but compared to cities like Yangcheng, we were lagging behind. I guess my time is up, Wu Linxian sighed, leaning back in her chair. A frantic knocking came at the door. Come in, she said lazily. A staff member burst in, gasping for air. Wu Linxian frowned. What's the rush? Sit down, catch your breath. Have some water. She poured a cup and handed it over, taking a sip of her own. But the staff member didn't touch the water. President, he wheezed. Downstairs, in the testing hall, a monster just showed up. Wu Linxian sprayed her water across the desk in a sudden burst. She didn't even bother wiping her chin. She scrambled to her feet, her eyes wide with shock and pure, unadulterated joy. A monster? She demanded, her voice sharp. What happened? Tell me everything. The staff member was shaken by her reaction. He quickly recounted the results of my assessment. A rank 1 beginner with a base combat power of 1,863. A mastery of the 10 desolate palms that pushed my total power to over 3,000. Wu Linxian let out a low, rough laugh. To hell with them, she muttered. They want me to lose my position? In their dreams. Then she threw her head back and laughed properly. In the next blink of an eye, she vanished. There was a deafening boom as she charged straight through the wall of her office, leaving a human-shaped hole in the masonry. She didn't even bother with the door. Downstairs, I was being led toward the second floor by a group of staff members. A few other middle-aged martial artists who had passed the exam were walking with me. Behind us, Li Ming sat on the floor of the testing hall like he'd lost his soul. Follow me, the staff member said, his voice dripping with politeness. We'll get your official rank 1 registration sorted out immediately. He completely ignored the older martial artists. They didn't seem to mind. They knew how the world worked. When a genius appeared, everyone else became background noise. We hadn't even reached the stairs when a blur of motion slammed down from above. The air whistled. Before I could process what was happening, a tall woman in her 30s stood in front of me. She looked a bit wild, her hair slightly messy from her high-speed exit. President, the staff member gasped. You came down yourself? He had sent word to her, expecting her to wait in her office. He never imagined she would literally crash through the building to get here. Wu Linxian's eyes scanned the group and locked onto me instantly. She gave me a small, warm smile. Hello, I'm Wu Linxian, the branch president of the Xingqing Martial Arts Association. I'm Su Hong, I replied, masking my surprise. She personally escorted me to the registration desk. The middle-aged martial artists watched us go, shaking their heads in envy. Being a genius changed everything. While they had to wait in line, the president herself was handling my paperwork. Su Hong, you're still in high school, right? She asked as we walked. Yes, I'm a student at Xingqing High. Wu Linxian paused, a flicker of annoyance crossing her face. Xingqing High? How did I not know about this? That old fox Li Qingshan told me he only had 2 average rank 1 students this year. He was crying to me about how poor the talent pool was. She gritted her teeth. I got the feeling my principal was going to get a very painful visit from her soon. With her personal oversight, my registration took less than a minute. As a rank 1 martial artist, you'll receive a monthly allowance of 10,000 Blue Star coins, she explained. You also get free access to a guidance technique. I'll take you to pick one out now. 10,000 coins. My heart leaped. That was more than my uncle and aunt earned in a month. I could tell my uncle to quit his grueling job the moment I got home. As we walked toward the technique library, Wu Linxian's demeanor remained surprisingly gentle. She spoke softly, explaining the fundamentals. Guidance techniques allowed us to absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. But that energy wasn't uniform. It had attributes. I practiced the Sky Flame Guidance technique, she said. It focuses on fire element energy. Not only does it strengthen my body, but it adds a burning property to my attacks. I listened intently. This wasn't in any of my textbooks. She opened her palm. A ball of intense, white-hot flame flickered into existence. The air around it hissed and turned black from the heat. I smelled something scorched. Then, she wrapped her fist in the fire and punched the air. A flaming fist print shot forward like a comet. Just before it hit the wall, she blew a soft breath, and the fire dissipated into nothing. So strong, I whispered. My pulse quickened. I wanted that power. Don't get ahead of yourself, she cautioned. Projecting attributes like that is difficult. Most rank 1 martial artists are lucky to even have a hint of an element in their strikes. She led me into a private room. There are 7 main attributes, she continued. Metal, wood, water, fire, earth, lightning, and wind. Each has its strengths. But if you're looking for pure destructive power, lightning is first. Metal is second. Fire is third. My eyes lit up. I want lightning. Wu Linxian smiled, as if she had expected that. Everyone wants lightning. But it's not a choice you make. It's about compatibility. I stayed silent, waiting for her to finish. She seemed impressed by my restraint. You can't just pick the strongest one, she explained. If your body isn't compatible with lightning, your cultivation will be slow and your power will be weak. However, you don't need to worry too much. To hit a power level of 1,863 without using any skills, that suggests you might have a special physique that hasn't fully awakened yet. With a body like yours, even a lesser attribute will make you a powerhouse. How strong is a special physique, exactly? I asked. She looked at me seriously. People with special physiques are invincible among their own rank. For them, fighting opponents at a higher level is as easy as breathing. Invincible. Fighting above my rank. I thought about my mortal body progress. If I pushed it to 100%, would that count as awakening a special physique? I needed more martial points. I needed them fast. Anyway, Wu Linxian said, pulling out 7 crystal balls of different colors. We need to test your affinity. If I tried to force myself to practice lightning instead of fire, I'd be half as strong as I am now. Let's see where you belong. When you touch the crystal, it will light up, Wu Linxian explained. The more the color fills the sphere, the higher your compatibility. She decided to show me how it worked. She placed her hand on the fire attribute crystal ball, and a piercing red light erupted from within. I watched closely. The glow filled about 4/5 of the sphere. My compatibility with the Sky Eye guidance technique is about 80%, she said, a trace of pride flickering across her face. Most martial artists only hit 20 or 30%. My 80% is considered extremely high. It's the reason I'm a branch president in my 30s. She turned to me, her eyes filled with intense anticipation. Now it's your turn. I knew what she was thinking. She suspected I had a special physique. In her mind, she probably expected me to hit 90%. To her, that was a massive gap. Even a 1% difference in compatibility could change a warrior's entire career. I stepped forward, feeling a bit nervous. I reached out and touched the fire crystal. The moment my skin made contact, a light far more blinding than hers exploded outward. The fire attribute didn't just fill the ball, it saturated it completely. The entire room turned a violent, glowing red. Wu Linxian's expression froze. Her anticipation turned into pure shock. What is this? She stammered. It's full. It's completely full. 100% compatibility. She let out a sharp scream and grabbed my shoulders, shaking me. Her face was flushed with excitement. Do you realize what this means, Su-hong? I shook my head. No idea. It means when you practice the Sky Eye technique, you will absorb fire element energy with 0 waste, she shouted, her voice trembling. Your cultivation efficiency will be the highest possible. She was vibrating with energy. At 80%, she had reached rank 5 by her 30s. She had never even seen a 100% compatibility warrior in person. They existed in the elite hubs like the Demon Capital or the Imperial Capital, but here, in a middle-tier city like Xingqing, this was a miracle. She looked like she wanted to pull out her phone and brag to every other branch president in the province. Then she stopped, her eyes darting around. If they found out about me, they'd try to steal me away. She forced herself to calm down. Su-hong, don't bother testing the others, she said firmly. Stick with fire. With your physique and 100% compatibility, becoming a powerhouse is a certainty. I scratched my head. To be honest, I was curious. I'd still like to try the other crystals. Wu Linxian looked at me like I was insane. Why hesitate when you have perfection? She felt a sudden, sharp realization of the gap between our talents. Fine, she sighed. Try them, but I guarantee nothing else will be this high. I nodded and reached for the lightning crystal. The room roared. Blue light flooded the sphere instantly. It was so intense I could actually hear the faint crackle of thunder echoing in the room. Wu Linxian's mind went blank. Her brain felt like it had short-circuited. Full again, she whispered. It's full again. How is this possible? She stared at me like I was a monster. I didn't notice. I was starting to suspect something. With my peerless talent trait, maybe my compatibility was locked at the maximum for everything. I reached for the wind crystal. Wu Linxian didn't even have words left. I already had 2 perfect attributes. Why was I still going? The wind crystal hummed and turned a brilliant green. 100%. She stood there, shell-shocked. 3 of them? No way. I didn't stop. I touched the metal crystal. It filled instantly. 100%. The wood crystal. 100%. The water crystal. 100%. Finally, I touched the earth crystal. It's saturated with a deep, heavy glow. 100%. Wu Linxian looked completely numb. Her scalp was crawling with disbelief. There were only 7 types of spiritual energy in the world, and I was a perfect match for every single one. Am I dreaming? She muttered. This felt too surreal to be true. I pulled my hand back, finally understanding. My talent meant I could choose any path and master it at the highest speed. But that created a new problem. This is actually a bit of a headache, I said, scratching my head. Wu Linxian looked like she was about to spit blood. A headache? What are you complaining about? You can pick whatever you want. She was genuinely frustrated now. She remembered how happy she was when she got 80%, how everyone envied her. Now, looking at me, she felt like she might lose control and punch me just to vent. Why are you so conflicted? She asked through gritted teeth. I looked at her, feeling genuinely torn. Because they're all at 100%. If I only pick one, I feel like I'm wasting all the others. Wu Linxian looked at me like she wanted to grind her teeth into dust. My desire to have everything was clearly driving her crazy. She probably thought I was being greedy, but I had to know. Sister Wu, I asked tentatively, is it possible for you to give me more than one introductory manual? Maybe one for each of the 7 attributes? She froze, her eyes widening in disbelief. Are you serious? You actually want to practice all of them? She started to say no, but then she paused. A thoughtful look crossed her face. She seemed to be searching her memory for the organization's handbook. Wait a second, she muttered. Technically, there isn't a rule against practicing 7 attributes at once. She looked at me, her expression complicated. I guess the people who wrote the rules never imagined someone would have a 100% compatibility with every single element. It just wasn't a possibility they planned for. She hesitated, her voice turning serious. There's no rule against it, but I have no idea what will happen if you try. No one has ever done this before. She stepped closer, her eyes locked onto mine. Even if you can actually practice all of them, your progress will be incredibly slow. It might take you 10 times longer to level up. Are you sure about this? I gave her a small smile. I definitely want to learn all 7. I just can't make up my mind yet, so I want to try them all out. If it really doesn't work, I'll just focus on the lightning attribute. Wu Linxian let out a long sigh of relief. She was genuinely afraid I was going to be stubborn and ruin my future. She told me about people in the past who tried to master multiple paths. They spent decades stuck as rank 1 martial artists. Sure, they were invincible against anyone at their own level, but they could never break through. What was the point of being the strongest rank 1 if you stayed that way for 50 years? In her mind, with my talent, I could become one of the strongest humans alive in 20 years if I picked one path. If I picked 7, I might never even reach rank 3. Fine, she said, finally giving in. I'll give you all 7 manuals. Just promise me you won't get stuck in a dead end. I nodded, and she went to fetch the books. She laid them out in front of me. Start practicing here, she instructed. If you have questions, ask. Try to get the basics down as fast as you can. Thanks, Sister Wu, I said, sitting down cross-legged, feeling a surge of excitement. I suggest you start with the Sky Fire Manual, she added. It's the one I'm most familiar with, so I can guide you better. Once you get the hang of it, switching to lightning will be easier. I opened the Sky Fire Manual and began to read. Wu Linxian stood to the side, pulling out her phone. I noticed her tapping the stopwatch app. When she had started with an 80% compatibility, it took her 12 hours to reach the introductory level. She probably figured that with my perfect score, I'd manage it in 2 or 3 hours. I focused on the words, feeling the energy in the air around me. It felt, Sister Wu, I said after a moment. I think I've got it. She looked up, her face a mask of pure shock. What? Already? That's impossible. She glanced down at her phone, and her eyes nearly popped out of her head. Her hands started to tremble. 34 seconds, she whispered. It hasn't even been a minute. Are you joking with me? I scratched my head, feeling a bit unsure. I think so. I can feel the fire attribute energy entering my body and merging with my blood. Is that what's supposed to happen? That was exactly what it felt like. Wu Linxian looked like her throat had gone bone dry. Try to control that energy, she managed to say. Throw a punch. I stood up, focused on the warmth in my veins, and struck out. As my fist cut through the air, a tiny, flickering flame danced across my knuckles. The sight of that flame sent Wu Linxian into a trance. Her mind went completely blank. She just stood there, staring at my hand like I was a ghost. Sister Wu, does this count as the introductory level? My voice snapped her back to reality. Her mouth twitched. She gave a mechanical, stiff nod. Yes, she said. You've entered the gate. Inside, she was screaming. 34 seconds. It wasn't even human. She wanted to slap herself for thinking it would take me 2 hours. She realized then that you couldn't use common sense to measure a monster with 100% compatibility. In the last 30 minutes, everything she knew about martial arts had been flipped upside down. That was actually pretty simple, I remarked. I was honestly surprised. I thought it would at least take a few minutes. Wu Linxian's eyes flickered. I could tell she had a sudden urge to hit me. Sister Wu, I asked, completely unaware of her frustration. How many minutes did it take you the first time? She opened her mouth to snap at me, then immediately clamped it shut. She realized that in my world, a world where things took 30 seconds, asking if she took a few minutes was actually me being polite. If she told me the truth, that it took her 12 hours, she'd lose all face. About 3 or 4 minutes, she lied, her voice tight. Oh, okay, I said, nodding. She let out a massive breath of relief when I didn't push for more details. Then, something else crossed my mind. By the way, Sister Wu, do you know much about spirit readers? She froze again, her eyes bulging. Don't tell me you're a spirit reader too? She looked genuinely terrified of the answer. If I had perfect elemental compatibility and I was a spirit reader, the other geniuses of my generation might as well give up and retire. I gave a dry laugh. No, I'm just curious. I wanted to know what the requirements for awakening are. Oh, good, she sighed, leaning against a table. She stayed quiet for a moment before bringing over a metallic device that looked like a high-tech helmet. This is a device for testing mental strength. Put it on. As I strapped the helmet on, she started explaining. No one knows the exact trigger for awakening as a spirit reader. Some people have weak mental power and wake up one day with abilities. Others are right on the edge their whole lives and never cross over. But generally, a newly awakened spirit reader has a mental strength of at least 100 points. That's the standard. I nodded, closing my eyes as the machine hummed to life. I pulled up my system interface in my mind, waiting to see how I measured up. My mental strength sat at exactly 26.5 points. To reach the awakening standard of 100, I needed another 73.5 points. It was a long road ahead. I sighed quietly and pulled the helmet off as the test finished. The screen confirmed it, 26.5. It was average, just the level of a normal person. Wu Linxian stared at the number, and I saw her shoulders drop. She actually looked relieved. I think she was terrified I would pop out a score over 100. It wasn't that she didn't want me to be strong, But she had been through too many shocks today. Her heart couldn't take any more surprises. Seeing a normal number finally made her feel like the world still made sense. I remained calm. I didn't feel disappointed at all. Wu Linxian watched me, her expression shifting into something like admiration. She probably thought I had incredible mental discipline for someone so young. To her, I was a genius with a steady heart. She likely believed that if someone like me didn't become a powerhouse, no one could. Suddenly, her expression turned serious. She seemed to remember something vital. Suhong, your monthly exam is tomorrow, right? Yeah, I replied, a bit surprised she cared about school schedules. I didn't think you followed that kind of stuff. Listen to me, she said, her voice heavy with earnestness. Give it everything you've got. Don't hide your strength. Not even a little bit. I blinked. I was already planning to go all out, but her tone was intense. I wondered if there was something going on behind the scenes that I didn't know about. I didn't hold back and asked her directly what was happening. Wu Linxian's gaze flickered, turning toward the window. She sighed, a sound full of exhaustion. In recent years, the friction between the myriad races and humanity on the all-heavens battlefield has been getting worse. A total war could break out at any moment. The human powerhouses on Blue Star held a massive meeting. They decided that starting with your grade, they will select geniuses from every city for special training camps. She turned back to me, her eyes sharp. The governments are pouring massive resources into this. They want the younger generation to grow at maximum speed. Since Xingqing High School has a tradition of monthly exams, they're using tomorrow's results as the selection criteria. They want the best of the best for the camp. I froze. I knew there were enemies outside our world, but I didn't realize things were this bad. A war of all races was looming. Usually, I figured the tall people would hold up the sky if it fell. My only real goal since getting the system was to make life better for my family. I wanted a comfortable home for my uncle, my aunt, and my siblings. The battlefield felt like a distant dream. Now, it was right in front of me. If humanity lost, everything I loved would be erased. My uncle and aunt, who worked their whole lives to raise me, would be slaughtered. Xiaoming and Xiaohai would have no future. I rubbed my face, feeling a sudden, crushing sense of urgency. I couldn't let that happen. I wouldn't allow it. Sister Wu, thank you for telling me this, I said, my voice cold and determined. I'm going to that training camp, no matter what. She kept her eyes on me, watching for a breakdown or a sign of fear. But I wasn't afraid. I was focused. The shock had already passed, replaced by a burning need to get stronger, faster than ever before.